Welcome to Nightward Echo. Tonight we uncover 5 disturbing true Halloween horror stories, where porch lights die, masks smile too long, and the night remembers your name. Almost 90% of you listen and disappear without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the darkness. Subscribe now, kill the lights, silence the world, and let's begin. They told me the power was cut the week the Wilkersons moved out. But every night after 12:03 a.m., the house still breathed light. I'm not exaggerating. I used to think it was faulty street lamps, the way the sodium glow pooled on the cul-de-sac and soaked into that ranch-style place like water. But there's a difference between light that falls and light that leaks. The Wilkersons' old place, number 12, started leaking in October, the year the weather stayed stubbornly warm and dry, like the town didn't want to admit fall had come. I live 2 doors down. If you stand at my mailbox, you can see straight through the maple branches to their front porch. And if you watched our block often enough, you'd know our routines. Sprinklers at 6, kids chasing the bus at 7:30, dog walkers at dusk, the hiss of grills and the murmuring of TVs through thin walls. Nothing dramatic. That's why I'm telling this, because the worst thing I've ever seen started with normal, with cheap decorations and a ladder left out on the lawn. The first odd thing wasn't the lights themselves. It was the way Mr. Wilkerson hung them. He did it alone, even though he had a bad back. The man had a stubborn tilt to his head, like he was always about to argue with an empty room. He spent the whole Sunday on the roof with boxes dragged from their garage, orange bins with masking tape labels like spooks, crows, wire. The day was brilliant and too hot for October. The asphalt smelled like warm pennies and my shirt stuck to my back as I mowed. When I turned off the blade, the only sound was the ladder's aluminum chiming when he moved it and the faint rattle of plastic bulbs. By dinner light, he had the place outlined, a border of tiny pumpkin faces strung under the eaves, a web draped across the picture window, a ghost staked in the yard with fabric so thin it moved when there wasn't a breeze. It didn't look like much. You've seen better. But when the timer clicked on at 7:00 p.m., everything glowed with that soft, cheap orange that makes your pupils open wide. The kids from the cul-de-sac clapped. The Wilkersons' youngest, a boy, kept running in little circles and shouting, 12:03, like it meant something. I should have asked him what he meant. I didn't. I just went inside to wash the grass off my arms and let the day end. The living room smelled faintly of dryer sheets and the ceiling fan ticked. I don't know why that detail sticks, the sound of the fan blades. Maybe because it was the last normal sound I remember from those nights. 3 nights later, the Wilkersons were gone. They didn't leave a note. Everybody pretends they know why: divorce, job, debt. I heard a rumor about a fight at the school. But the point is, the house got emptied fast. The realty sign went up while I was at work. I came home to find a lockbox over the doorknob, blinds drawn, and the lights still on. The first week without them, the pumpkins blinked right on at 7 and blinked off around 9 like there was still a timer. But on the 8th night, after a late storm with mean, hard rain, they didn't go off. 10, 11, midnight. The whole block slept orange. At 12:03, when the minute ticked over, every single bulb stopped blinking and went steady, brighter than before, like something had decided to stop mimicking people and just be itself. The next morning, I saw the notice from the utility company taped to their door. Power terminated 10:16. The meter was dead. The outlet covers were sealed. It should have been dark in there. I took a picture anyway, not because I didn't believe it, but because part of me wanted proof for the version of myself who would insist later it had been a trick of reflection. The photo is still in my phone, 20/23/10/18/06/42, metadata showing no flash. The house glows in it, faint, not dramatic, like the hum inside the world grew strong in that one spot and bled out. You might think I called someone right then, the police, the power company, the realtor. I did none of those things. I sent the image to my girlfriend, Jenna, with a shrug emoji. I made coffee. On my porch, the air smelled wet and cold, the way it does after a storm, and for a second I felt almost relieved. The weather had finally remembered it was October. I told myself condensation, moisture, something to do with solar. I don't know. You tell me what you would have said to yourself. Would you have done the same? Normalcy held. I went to work, came back to a quiet neighborhood, threw away a stack of supermarket coupons with bats on them. At 12:02 a.m. that night, I woke up a moment before my phone's lock screen lit the room. No notification, just the screen pulsing to life for no reason. I stared at the time, 12:02. I don't know what made me sit up. The house was silent. No fan ticking, no fridge hum. I'd turned it low. The noise had started grating on me. From my bed, I can see a sliver of the street through the curtains if there's light outside. I watched the strip of fabric go from matte to translucent at 12:03. The light seeped through an even wash. My phone camera roll shows a new picture at 12:04 that I don't remember taking. It's mostly black. If you scrub the exposure, there's a shape in the window across the street, like two hands placed flat against glass. Maybe my thumb hit the button in my sleep. Maybe it's pareidolia. You could convince me of that. I'd like to be convinced. For a while, I convinced myself pretty well. Stupidly well. Days at work, nights at home. The house would glow at 12:03 and I'd roll away from the window like a kid avoiding eye contact. Every 3 or 4 nights, a sensation would wake me instead. The press of cool air at my ankles or the smell of something burned and old, like dust cooking on a hot coil. Sometimes I'd hear a single footstep on my porch, wood complaining under weight. I told myself neighbors cut across my yard. I told myself the air conditioning kicks strangely. The brain loves a story that lets it keep sleeping. One Saturday, I was raking leaves when I noticed a different sound under the scratch of the rake. A light, inconsistent tapping. Plastic against glass. I stopped. My street does this long exhale in late afternoon. The cicadas lower their volume, dogs go in. The sun threads through the trees at that angle where it feels thin and metallic. I traced the tapping to the Wilkersons' place. I walked to the sidewalk and squinted at their picture window. Something moved behind the slatted blinds, a slow ripple like someone running a finger along them from the inside. Tap, 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 not urgent. Testing. I should have gone home. I should have pretended I didn't hear. But I did what you would probably do if you've ever been curious enough to get burned. I went closer. The yard had that stale vacancy smell, like carpet and cardboard. The ghost that used to wave in the breeze lay tangled around its stake. In the corner of the porch, the ladder he'd used still leaned forgotten. I put my palm on the front door. It was cold. Not the cool of shade. Cold like metal in winter. This is where I tell you I tried the knob and it was locked, or the lockbox blinked red at me, or I walked away. I didn't. The knob turned. The lockbox hung open, empty. The realtor's sign squeaked faintly on its post. The air inside tasted wrong. Not rotten, flat as if every molecule had been used and put back. I didn't need to step inside to see the living room. It's a standard layout. My place is the mirror of it. The pumpkins clung to the window frame from the inside now, cords stapled down neatly. No power strips, no outlet, just wire swallowed into the walls. The blinds shivered with that same non-breeze. Tap, 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 each touch left an oval of clearer glass on the dust. "Hello?" I said, because we say hello to houses when we don't know what else to say. My voice sounded too big in there, like I was hearing it played back. No answer, there never was. But as I stood there, my phone buzzed in my pocket with the dry doorbell vibration I use for texts. When I checked, the new thread was from an unknown number with no name assigned. 585-013-203. The message said, "Please don't come in." The timestamp read 12:03 a.m., sent 2 nights ago, unheard. The content field had a tiny gray lock next to it, like some encrypted service I hadn't installed. You know how your heart can tighten until it feels like it doesn't fit your ribs? That's what mine did. I took a picture of the message, because I've learned that when something doesn't make sense, part of you starts erasing it immediately. When I looked up again, the house seemed closer. Not literally, just the feeling that it tried to step forward while I was looking away. The air sharpened with a faint smell of hot plastic. I shut the door and walked home and told myself I had crossed some line I shouldn't have, and it would be better if I didn't think about it. Then, because I'm not as brave as I want to be, I put a kitchen chair under my doorknob like a cartoon. At 12:03 that night, the whole room pulsed brighter, though my curtains. I turned my phone face down and lay very still, as if pretending to sleep would convince whatever watched me I wasn't worth the trouble. When the phone lit by itself with no sound, I broke my own rule and looked. Another message from 555-003-1203. "Are you home?" Timestamps again said 12:03, but the date field glitched and rolled numbers like an odometer. 10, then snapped back to the current date. I didn't reply. I didn't block. I slid the phone into the drawer and stared at the ceiling until dawn scraped gray across it. The room smelled faintly like wet cardboard and penny metal. That week, the false safety came. I need to tell it honestly. On Wednesday, city workers came and yanked the Wilkerson sign out of the yard. On Thursday, 2 vans showed up, electrical company logos on their doors. They went inside with flashlights. The latter finally got folded and tossed into a truck. Friday morning, a translucent orange tag flapped on the mailbox. Condemned, unsafe structure. We stood in the street, the neighbors and I, and made the kind of brittle jokes people make when they're relieved. Haunted house special. Bet it's mold. Bet it's meth. We laughed because laughing is easy compared to acknowledging that something in your line of sight has changed shape and does not want to change back. That night, the lights didn't come on at 7. They didn't glow at 9. At midnight, my phone stayed dark. I fell asleep before 12:03 for the first time in days. The silence was heavy and kind. Sometime deep in the hour, I woke to a sound like someone dragging a sweater across the floor. The hair on my arms rose. I held my breath. The sound came again, closer, fabric snagging, the faint tick of threads catching on small splinters. A whisper of cold air touched my neck. My mouth filled with that new coin taste, and something in me, old and stubborn, refused. I sat up and said, louder than smart, "Stop." The silence that followed felt like the inside of a hand wrapped around my head. Then nothing. Morning came. I told myself I'd had a very realistic stress dream. I vacuumed the living room because it smelled faintly like someone else had been there. The dustbin was heavier than it should have been. Saturday, I tried to reset my life by reclaiming the mundane: groceries, laundry. I took my phone to the repair shop in town because the screen had started ghost touching. Little flickers, along the edge like invisible fingers trying to open apps. The kid behind the counter wiped it, ran diagnostics, shrugged. No water damage. No screen cracks. Do you maybe have a notification setting that, lights it up every night? He smiled but didn't meet my eyes. I asked him to clear any unknown profiles. He did. When I left, the bell over the door jingled with that hollow sound metal makes when there's a temperature difference on either side. I held the phone and didn't unlock it. I didn't need to see the last call log to know there was one. I could feel it like a bruise. Later, back home, I looked anyway. There it was, 12:03 a.m., a single ring. No caller ID. Would you have called back? I didn't, not then. The little things piled up. Jenna stopped sleeping over because she said the place made her feel like she'd just stepped into a room where someone had been talking about her. "She didn't say it to blame me?" She said it quietly while holding my hand. And when I pulled away, it wasn't because of pride. It was because I didn't want anything old and hungry to know what I loved. The Wilkersons' house stayed dark for a full week. The tag on the mailbox faded at the corners. Then exactly 7 days after the condemnation, the glow came back at 12:03. No ramp up from 7. No timer, just sudden light like a held breath let go. Not orange now. White like a test studio. The blinds strobed as if hands passed along them one after the other, testing each slat's resistance. I left a voicemail for the city. I did it finally. The recording told me to put my complaint in writing. I wrote an email. It bounced back with a server error at exactly 12:03 a.m. There are only a few moments in my life I can point to and say, after that, a line existed. The night I went inside number 12 is one of them. It wasn't bravery. I was angry at the house the way you get angry at a neighbor's dog that keeps barking. It felt personal even though I kept telling myself it couldn't be. I went at 11:48 p.m. because I didn't want to walk into it at the precise minute. I wore a jacket because the air had developed that thin basement chill even outside. The street was otherwise quiet. Somewhere far away, a train sounded like a sigh. I brought a flashlight, though the beam seemed wrong when I turned it on, as if the light was made of felt. I stepped onto their porch. The boards didn't complain. My own pulse did. A regular thud I tried to separate from any other sound. The door opened with minimal pressure. Inside, the air pushed against me, not like wind, like the thickness of a crowded room. I said, "I won't touch anything." Saying it out loud made my voice warble. I went left the way my place goes into the living room. It was empty of furniture. The carpet had lines in it from a vacuum weeks ago. The pumpkins along the window frame were dead plastic, no light in them yet. 11:53. I breathed out, surprised I'd been holding it. The shadows felt padded. I could hear the faintest sound, something far away and metallic like a loose shutter, or like a mouth making the shape of a word without voice. At 11:57, my flashlight flickered. Its cone narrowed and widened, narrowed again. When I tapped it, the casing felt warmer than it should have. The smell of hot plastic returned, stronger now, and under it, a sweetness like the inside of a new box of crayons. Sweat started along my back. At 11:59, the house gave a soft little heave, as if it was adjusting to look better in the mirror. Right before 12:03, I heard the heel-toe of footsteps on the hallway tile to my right. A rhythm, not in a hurry. Whoever had been tracing the blinds had decided to walk. I raised the flashlight and said very carefully, "I won't hurt you." That sentence looks ridiculous here. In the moment, it felt like the only human thing I could offer. 3. In the instant the minute changed, every bulb lit at once, but not from power. The light came from the surfaces themselves, the window, the glass, the polished tile. It flooded outward like someone had turned the house inside out and the bright meat of it was pressed against the walls. The pumpkins, still dead plastic, reflected light they didn't make. My shadow doubled, tripled, lengthened toward me instead of away, a little slower than it should have moved, like the memory of my body trying to keep up. The footsteps stopped at the open mouth of the hallway. I swung the flashlight beam onto the floor. There were small ovals of moisture, heel then toe, evaporating as the light touched them. The air got colder, so sharply it made my teeth ache. A breath moved across my cheek, not mine. It smelled like winter and coin metal, and faintly something singed. A voice spoke in my left ear, quiet, as if it thought it was whispering for my sake. "Don't look at the window. The thing about being told not to look is that you look." I wish I could tell you I didn't. I wish I could say I kept my gaze on the carpet and crawled backwards out the door and never went near the place again. You already know I looked. It's in the shape of this story. In the way I keep circling back to the glass, I lifted my eyes. The blinds were half open. Between the slats, the world outside looked wrong. Not because it was different, but because it was precise. Two in focus. Every leaf in the maple was separate and delineated, lit from underneath. And there, pressed against the other side of the glass, were a set of hands, palms flat, fingers spread as if someone leaned from outside to peer in at me. They weren't attached to anything I could see. The fingerprints were smudged swirls of light. When the hands slid down the glass, they left trails like snail tracks that glowed and then faded. Between the three middle fingers of the left hand, something dark was wedged, like a thread caught on a nail. I didn't know I was walking toward it until my shins hit the low sill. The voice at my ear, still very calm, said, "Don't." I said, "Who are you?" The answer wasn't words. The air moved in a shape like a person taking a breath and pushing it back, a reversal. I reached toward the blinds. The instant my fingertip touched a slat, the light in the room dropped out. Not dimmed, cut. The flashlight became the only glow, and in its oval I saw the curtain on the far side of the glass. For a tenth of a second, my brain pretended I was looking into my own living room, because the curtain pattern was mine, because beyond it was a shape like my couch, because the streetlight with its flickery transformer spark was placed exactly where it is outside my house. Then I realized what should have been obvious and hasn't stopped making my stomach lurch. The window didn't show outside. It showed a copy. Not a mirror. Not an echo. My living room with a half-second delay. In the glow, the hands I'd seen from the other side pressed now from my side, against that distant glass. The prints aligned with nothing mine. The delay made me dizzy. The flashlight beam in my hand showed up there a heartbeat late, narrower and slightly off-center. Like my version of myself had worse aim. Then something stepped into the edge of that other room just outside the flashlight circle. The shape was human, the way a coat on a chair is human at midnight. It leaned its head as if considering. The voice at my ear, closer now. I could feel the pressure of it in my hair, said, "Don't wave." I understood why. The thing was waiting for a cue. The way a mirror waits for you to raise your hand so it knows where to put your reflection. I backed away one step, too. The flashlight trembled and the beam jittered in the frame. In the other room, the beam jittered, late. The thing leaned further into the light. It didn't have a face I could see, only a suggestion of features like someone pressed their thumb into clay where eyes should go. The place those eyes would be were dark holes. Around them, a faint phosphorescence like my phone screen in a dark room. I blinked hard. Tears of strain had formed from not wanting to blink at all. "I want to leave," I said. The words sounded small and very young. The voice, my companion, the one that had warned me, said, "Walk, don't run." It said it like it had said it to someone before. Like someone didn't listen, I walked. My knees wanted to sprint, but my ankles felt heavy and precise, like I was making an offering of each step. The house's light burred at the edges, a high-frequency shimmer I felt in my teeth. When I reached the plane of the doorway, the temperature shifted. The porch air felt like air again. My flashlight steadied. Behind me, I heard the faintest click, like fingernails tapping a window when you're 2 rooms away. At the exact moment my shoe hit the concrete, my phone rang once. Not a full ring. A single bright electronic chime. 12:03, I didn't look. I kept walking very calmly down their steps, across their lawn, onto the sidewalk. I crossed to my house and put my hand on my own doorknob, then took it off and stood there with my keys out because something scraped inside the lock from the other side, like someone got to it first. I waited, I counted to 30. My hand shook. My breath condensed in the cold like smoke. At 31, the scraping released. The key slid. I went inside and leaned against the door and slid down until I was sitting on the mat. The room smelled like my detergent again, and the specific dust of my couch and a faint overlay of penny metal cold. After that night, I did the dumbest thing I could have done next. I tried to find a pattern. I went through my phone logs. Every night I'd been awake to notice the glow, a call at 12:03. 1 ring, no ID. On nights I had stayed at Jenna's, nothing. My security camera feed, the one pointed at the porch, stopped saving clips at exactly 12:02:58 and resumed at 12:04 with a gap like an eyelid closing. The gap happened even when I set the camera to continuous record. When I downloaded the files, the missing seconds left a corrupt block that my media player labeled null. I screenshotted that too. I made a folder called 12:03 with copies of everything, because part of me wanted to show it to someone, and part of me wanted to keep it away from other people like it was contagious. I didn't talk to my neighbors. They'd already decided it was mold. I didn't talk to Jenna. She had started answering my texts with a neutral charity I couldn't stand, so I talked to myself, out loud sometimes, in the kitchen, where the fluorescent light flickered slightly every 3rd minute. I said things like, "You're fine, and it needs a witness, and you should move." I didn't move. Around this point in a story, there's supposed to be an escalation. The part where the scratching becomes a scream. That's not how this went. The worst of it is the patience. Whoever or whatever it is, it doesn't rush. It waits for your small failures. You forget to close the curtain. You let your phone face upward on the nightstand. You pause in front of glass at the wrong moment and catch your own shape twice with the wrong delay. One night I forgot to arm my alarm. At 12:03, the display lit on its own and ran the code 12:03 across like a child learning to write. Another night, the thermostat changed the target temperature to 12.3 degrees, which isn't even a setting it should allow. And by morning, my breath had made tiny frosts on the windows inside. My phone gallery populated with 5 new pictures of my living room, all taken at 12:03, and in the last one, the couch cushion had an impression as if someone sat. I hadn't sat there. I had been in bed holding my breath. A week after all that, I made the mistake of calling the number back. I did it at noon on a Sunday because sunlight makes people foolish. The phone rang once and picked up without sound. Not silence, room tone. The faint hiss of air passing over a microphone. I heard something like a page turning. Then a voice, mine, said hello. From very far away, I hung up. My chest tightened so hard my vision haloed. I thought I might pass out. When I could breathe again, I went to the bathroom and turned on the light and stared into the mirror like a cliché and hated myself for being one. I splashed water on my face. When I looked up, my mirror self was a fraction behind me. Only a fraction. Enough that my hand on the sink arrived late. My reflection's eyes were a degree too wide, like it was excited to see me. The light flickered. The room smelled faintly like burned dust. The fan ticked. I forced myself to keep looking until the delay caught up, until the mirror was normal again. That minute is the longest minute I've ever stood through. Afterward, I sat on the edge of the tub and laughed until it sounded like sobbing. I felt stupid, and then I felt guilty for feeling stupid because there are worse things than this, and mine was on paper small. No blood, no bruises, just a house 2 doors down that wouldn't stop glowing and a number that wanted me to notice it. What do you do with a thing like that? Sell the house? I tried. I had a realtor come. She stood in my living room at 1 p.m. and said phrases like market value and turnkey and we'll stage it. My phone, face down on the table, lit at exactly 1:03 p.m. with no notification. She didn't see. She left, and at 1:12 a.m., not 12:03 off schedule as if to test me, the number texted, "Don't leave while I'm still learning you." I turned the phone off. The screen stayed faintly lit anyway, a ghost of the last lock screen, as if something had taken a long exposure of my day and wouldn't let it go dark. A false calm returned. It lulled me for 4 days. I slept with earplugs. At 12:03 I didn't wake. The logs show missed calls, but I didn't hear them. I thought maybe the house had gotten bored. Needing patterns, we tell ourselves stories of progress. That's what I had when I walked out onto my porch on the 5th night at 11:58. Cool air easing the grit from my lungs. I remember thinking the cool felt good. I remember breathing like a person who could still be fixed. That was the night the door closed behind me. I had left it cracked. Habit. The air moved and it shut with a soft click, the kind of sound you don't register until you try the handle and it doesn't open. My keys were in the bowl inside. I stood there like an idiot for a full second, hand on the deadbolt I couldn't turn. At 12:03, the street went bright white, the color I'm beginning to associate with a choice. The Wilkersons' house glowed without a source, the light pooling across the asphalt like water that doesn't care about gravity. My own front window behind me lit up. I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my shoes. The concrete of the porch felt colder than it should have through my socks. Somewhere to my left, a slow, deliberate tread descended the steps of number 12 and crossed onto the sidewalk, not toward me, parallel. As if whoever or whatever it was wanted me to hear that it existed independent of my eyes. I did something contrary to all the voices' advice. I ran. Down the steps. Across the yard. The grass felt like the cheap silk fringe on a lampshade. My breath shot thin in my chest. I headed not toward the bright house but toward the dark between houses, as if darkness meant safety now. I made it as far as the seam of shadow when light pulsed and I saw my own shape thrown ahead of me, a half-second behind. It caught up too slowly. I felt something like a palm lay flat between my shoulder blades, not pushing, measuring. I stopped. The palm withdrew. When I turned, the street was empty. The kind of empty that makes your stomach drop because it's obviously pretending. The blinds at number 12 shivered. In my house's front window behind my curtains, a figure stood. My figure, the head tilted. The hand lifted. The delay was wrong. I backed into the dark and stayed there until blue edged the roofs. The neighborhood looked ordinary then, embarrassing in its normalcy. Birds. A garbage truck. The realtor's flyer stuck under someone's wiper blade. I went to my door. It was unlocked. The keys were where I'd left them in the bowl, and the bowl was warm to the touch as if someone had just cupped it. After that, I stopped thinking in days and started thinking in minutes. I marked 12:03 on a piece of paper and taped it above the stove. I stopped using mirrors at night. I set my phone to airplane mode at 11:50 and put it in the freezer, because I'd read somewhere that cold kills signals, and I wanted to insult whatever logic this thing uses. At 12:03, the phone still lit faintly. Inside the icebox, the screen bright enough to white out my stack of frozen peas. I started counting how long it stayed on each night. The number changed. I wrote the numbers down. On the third night of counting at minute 12, the light didn't go off. It grew so bright I could see the dust motes in the freezer air, turning and turning. I keep thinking that if I had told someone early, shown Jenna the photos, sent the logs to everyone I know, made a scene, the house would have lost interest. I know that's not how it works. Houses don't care about attention. Some things just need time. It is possible I invited it. There's a line in some manual about haunted places that says, they prefer the lonely. I was lonelier than I let on. I worked late on purpose. I let calls go to voicemail. My therapist once told me avoidance looks like safety until it makes your world very small. On the night I finally asked for help, it was because my world felt like a closet with someone else breathing in it. I called Jenna at 11:45 and asked her to stay on the line with me through 12:03. I didn't tell her why. She said okay, After a pause that felt complicated, we talked about nothing. The way normal people talk. I told her the fridge was making a new noise, like bees far away. She told me her upstairs neighbor had started pacing, like a metronome. At 12:02, the call quality degraded. Not severely, just a warp like audio underwater. "Are you?" she said. I heard my own voice in my other ear say, "Are you?" Half a beat later. 12:03 ticked, a small mechanical sound from the oven clock. The line went quiet. The screen still showed the call live. I said, "Can you hear me?" The answer, from both the phone and the space by my left ear arriving at slightly different times. "Can you hear me?" The two voices braided to make one. I hung up. She texted a minute later, "Call me?" My reply didn't send. I put my phone down face up because I couldn't stand not seeing it. The screen turned black. It stayed black. And in the black I saw a shape sitting where I sat looking at a black screen. The shape smiled as if it had learned the expression from a description. "I don't have a clean ending for you. This isn't a podcast. I can't give you a dash cam clip or a neat reveal. I can tell you what I found on my doorframe 2 days ago. A child's scrawl, scratched into the paint at shoulder height in a hand not tall enough to reach there. Two numbers, 12 and 03 stacked. Between them, a line, a fraction. I rubbed it with my thumb. The indent is shallow and clean, like a new cut on a finger. I can also tell you what I found when I finally worked up the nerve to open the lockbox still hanging on the Wilkersons' front door. Inside there was a key, a note folded twice, and a phone with no brand name. The note said in block letters I recognized from my own old notebooks, "Don't answer the calls." The phone had one contact saved, me, and one message sent, "Please don't come in." The message was dated last year. The contact info line read Re5 Re03 203. I put the phone back. I left the note. I shut the box and slid the code until the wheels blurred. When I got home, the smell inside was wrong again. Like the house had eaten something it couldn't digest. If you look through my curtains, you'll see it too. The faint light that doesn't have a source. Bleeding out at 12:03. It's smaller now, contained, like it has learned not to frighten me into leaving. That's the worst part. It's patient. It's learning. And it still wants me to look. Every night when the minute turns, some part of me looks in spite of everything I've written here. The blinds, the glass, the space where my reflection should be behaving and isn't. I'm writing this because maybe, if you ever find yourself on a porch with your hand on a knob and a house on the other side that doesn't need power to glow, you'll do what I didn't. You'll step back. You'll let it want without feeding it. I don't think the Wilkersons moved. I think they were moved. Little by a thing that takes the shape of attention. If that sounds too imaginative for a quiet street, come sit on my couch at 12:02 and watch the minute change with me. I'll make coffee. We can listen together to the fan tick, to the soft plastic tap at the window, to the single footstep after the door shuts and the house decides you're inside now. We can watch the phone light and not answer. We can count how long the glow lasts. We can ignore the faint breath just behind your ear and that small voice, almost kind, that will tell you not to look at the glass because if you look, you'll see what I see. And once you do, you'll understand why I still live here. But now I never look out the window after 12:03 a.m. I used to tell this as a joke, when I still believed jokes could keep the dark from sticking. It starts like a lot of dumb college stories start. I moved into a cheap off-campus house because it was cheaper than the dorms and closer to the bus line. And something in the basement had a face. You want a first line that hooks you, right? Fine. Here. I have photos on my phone of me sleeping with a mask I do not own, taken from 3 feet away, while my bedroom door was locked from the inside. The house was one of those narrow, slumping places that look like a person who fell asleep on a bus, chin on chest, shoulder against shoulder. 2 floors, a damp basement, and a porch held up by stubborn hope. The listing said vintage character, which meant creaking stairs, thin walls, and windows that rattled when the bus turned the corner a block away. When I walked through it the first time, the floor was cold through my socks. It was September, the kind of bright, brittle heat where shadows look cut with scissors. The landlord, a graying guy named Will, shook my hand like he was measuring it. "Old bones," he said, patting the railing. "But she's solid." I took the smallest room upstairs because it was $20 cheaper. I told myself I was being responsible. I lugged my mattress up the stairs alone and set it on the floor. because I didn't own a bed frame. The window faced the backyard. If I leaned to the left, I could see the strip of alley where the trash cans lived. Around dusk, the smell of someone else's laundry detergent drifted through the screen, warm and chemical sweet. It made everything feel temporarily clean. The first night, the house felt like a person trying not to wake up. Wood settling, pipes ticking, the fridge motor humming its tired song. I scrolled on my phone until my eyes blurred, and when I set it on the crate I used as a nightstand, the screen reflected the slatted light from the blinds across my hand in narrow stripes. Somewhere below, a door eased against its frame and shut, slow and soft, like someone leaving a room and trying not to be rude. I told myself it was just the air current. Those old houses breathe. Everyone says that. It started with the basement because all old houses start with the basement. Our washing machine was down there, the kind with a lid that clanged and a dryer that left your clothes slightly damp in the pockets like forgetting a word. The stairs were steep, each riser taller than my foot, treads shaved narrow by 100 years of shoes. At the bottom, the concrete floor was painted flaking green. There was one light bulb hanging from a string. When you pulled it, the filament brightened in a slow orange yawn and then decided to be white. The smell was the same every time, wet cardboard metal, and something like plastic that had been warmed once and never forgot. Against the far wall, there was a strip of plywood that didn't match the rest of the foundation. Someone had screwed it over a gap and painted it the same sick green, but the wood had swollen around the screws like a healed wound. "Don't worry about that," Will had said. "We sealed an old vent or something. The previous owner did it," he waved it off. "Basement history. I did my laundry there every Sunday morning. It became a ritual. I'd pull on the hoodie that had paint on the sleeve from my summer job, carry the basket down the groaning steps and mind the second-to-last stair that had a slide to it, the kind that takes your foot like a joke. The bulb clicked, brightening, and the air wrapped cold around my ankles. If I stood still, I could hear the tiny noise of moisture beating somewhere I couldn't see, the kind of sound you only notice when you're alone. By the third Sunday, when I'd finally started to feel like the house might be done testing me, I noticed it. One edge of the mismatched plywood had loosened. Not much, maybe the width of a fingernail, but enough that the paint had cracked in a spider web and the line of the seam was visible. I set the basket down. I reached out and pushed the board. It gave, and then caught against whatever was behind it with a hollow thud like tapping your knuckle against a door with no room on the other side. That should have been it, right? The kind of thing you clock and tell yourself you'll call the landlord about and then forget. But the seam bothered me in that small way a hair in your mouth bothers you. You can keep living with it, but it will touch your tongue every time you swallow. I went back up, grabbed a butter knife from the drawer and returned to the basement like I was going to apologize to it. I slid the knife into the hairline gap. Dust fell out in a dry little breath that got in the back of my throat. Under the plywood, there was plaster or something like it, crumbling and soft. The knife carved a channel and bit against something that wasn't plaster. It made a tiny scraping sound in the quiet, a pebble on glass. It was plastic. A smooth curve. I widened the hole with careful prise. The board tilted, a screw fell and pinged on the concrete. And with that little surrender, everything felt weirdly easy. I levered the board off and it fell face down with a clap that echoed too long. Behind it wasn't a vent. It was a shallow cavity in the wall, a sealed-over niche made by whoever liked hiding things, and in it was a mask. I want to say it was a Halloween mask to make it less. You know the kind. Cheap latex, slightly greasy, a face that was almost a face because it had to fit everyone. It was cracked across the bridge of the nose like it had been folded hard. The color wasn't white. It was the yellow of paper old enough to believe in other presidents. The eyes were just holes. But whoever made it had painted the lids in a shadow of gray, and that small effort made it worse. I picked it up and the neck stuck to the plaster for one disgusting heartbeat, then came free with a whispering peel. A smell came with it, rubber and something stale like closet air when you open a box you forgot you owned. I laughed. I'm not proud of that. It was a nervous sound, high and light, as if I'd found a spider that looked exactly like a spider. "Okay," I said out loud to the empty room, because I was the kind of person who talks to basements instead of telling another human. "Okay." I went upstairs and texted my friend Nate a photo, 9/18/10:23 a.m. Me, found decor LMAO. He sent back a skull emoji and hang it in the living room, bro. I did not hang it in the living room. I set it on the washing machine to get a better picture, and then I put it on my dresser upstairs facing the door, because I had the petty impulse to make it look like it was guarding my room. Was it dumb to keep it? Probably. But it was a thing the house had made the effort to give me. And when you're 20 and poor, you accept free things, even if they smell like the last second before a light goes out. The next week was normal, like a television sitcom. Morning classes, microwaved lunches, the whir of the bus doors letting go of strangers. The weather shifted. A dry wind started up that chattered leaves in the street and lifted a little grit into your teeth when you smiled. The house tolerated me. At night, I'd hear someone else's streaming show through the wall in the living room downstairs, voices rising and falling, and the laugh track would make me cringe and then feel safe. I slept with my window a little cracked. The air that came in was cold and thin, a polite guest. Sometimes the streetlight outside threw a bar of light across my ceiling that drifted when a truck went by. The mask on my dresser was just an object. That's the thing. Objects have the courtesy to stay what they are until you notice they don't. 3 nights later, around 2 a.m., my phone lit the ceiling with a cold rectangle of light. I woke because my body now wakes for that light no matter how tired my brain is. No buzz, no chime, just the glow. I rolled over and saw nothing on the lock screen. No notification. No time lost. Just 2:03 a.m., bright and sterile, my face reflected like a smudge. I pressed the side button and set it down. The screen went black. I tried to swallow and my mouth stuck. The house was too quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear your own breath make small edges in the air. Faintly from downstairs, a soft footstep. Not a creak by itself, one stair complaining, then another. A careful wait, like someone who knew the house learning it again. I lay there with my eyes open, listening hard enough to hurt, and then the furnace kicked on with its rusty sigh and the sound was swallowed. It could have been anything. Maybe it was me, holding too still and hearing my own blood in my ears as footsteps. I almost got up to check, but there's a point where getting up means witnessing something you cannot unfuture, and I wasn't brave at 2 a.m. The next morning I had a quiz. I forgot the footsteps and remembered the mask only because my hoodie brushed against it on the dresser when I grabbed my keys. And for a split second I thought it had moved because it had dust on it in a different pattern than dust should have. I told myself I was being stupid. The house settled in and settled me. Then the photos started. The first one appeared on my phone Sunday night after I came back from Nate's place. We were playing games and I lost like I always do. And we trash-talked and then apologized for trash-talking and ate leftover pizza with the sogginess that cold cheese gets at midnight. I got back around 1:38 a.m. according to my camera roll, because I took a picture of the bus stop for no reason other than habit. The orange of the streetlight and the vague blur of a stranger beyond it, like a promise that I was still a person in a world. I set my phone on the crate beside my bed, plugged it in and slept like people sleep when they've talked enough not to think. I didn't wake for the glow this time. In the morning at 7:19 a.m., I swiped open the camera roll to send Nate the blurry bus stop with a sarcastic caption about urban poetry, and there were 4 photos at 2:13 a.m. I did not take 4 photos at 2:13 a.m. The thumbnails were all the same, small dark squares pierced by a wedge of light in a shape like a shoulder. I tapped the first. It was me, asleep. My face turned to the window, my cheek half buried in the pillow. The sheet had twisted around my waist, and above my face, looking down, was the mask. Not on a shelf, not on the dresser. In the foreground, huge on a face. The flash had not fired, but my screen's glow must have lit just enough of the room to make the whites gray. The eyes were black holes. Behind them was shadow. The distance from the lens was intimate enough that you could see the edges of my eyelashes resting on my skin. I sat very still and scrolled to the next. Me again. The angle slightly different, like the photographer had leaned. The mask closer. A suggestion of shoulder beneath it, a dark fabric, not mine. In the third, the frame crooked, catching the corner of my mouth. The fourth photo was the ceiling, blurred, the boxy shadow of the ceiling fan cutting the light into shivering bars. I wish I could say I ran screaming into the street. I didn't. I put the phone down very carefully, like it was heavy with something that could spill. My breath came in fast little huffs, not because there was no air, but because I was hoarding it. My room smelled like laundry soap and the faint must that creeps out of old paint when you keep the window shut. I walked to the door and checked the lock, though I knew I'd locked it. It was still turned, the metal cold under my fingers even in the rays of thin morning sun. I put my palm on the dresser and felt the tiny grit of dust because I needed to feel something like gravity. The mask sat on the dresser. I picked it up. It was lighter than I remembered. The rubber had a tacky give to it, like a fingertip. I turned it over. There was nothing inside. No string, no sweat, no hair. Just that smell again. Old, stale, a room with the curtains closed. I pressed it to my own face for a half second, a stupid impulse, and then flinched and set it down as if it were hot. The feeling was like holding a phone you've been told is stolen. You don't know how to hold it without it declaring you. I told myself a story because I needed one. I must have taken the photos myself in my sleep. Maybe I did a weird half-waking thing and put the mask on and took pictures because people do stranger things. Sleepwalking runs in families, doesn't it? Does it run in mine? I couldn't remember anybody mentioning it. I texted my mom, 9:25, 8:02 a.m. Me, random Q, but did I ever sleepwalk as a kid? 9:25, 8:10 a.m. Mom, only when you wanted cookies. Why? 10:25, 8:12 a.m. Me, no reason, ha ha ha. I stared at the photos until they were just patterns. Then I deleted them. I emptied the recently deleted folder because I am careful sometimes in all the wrong ways. Then I went to class, and all day I couldn't remember my professor's mouth moving. I only saw the mask's black eyes and the soft curve of its cheek turned by the phone's glow, like an animal startled in the woods. That night I moved the mask to the closet. I put it on the top shelf. I set a stack of textbooks in front of it like a barricade. I shut the door and slid the old lock. You feel better when you do a thing with your hands. I wedged a chair under my bedroom doorknob because that's what people do in movies. Then I laughed at myself and removed the chair because the door opened inward and the chair wouldn't help. You never think about how your doors open until you want them to shut. At 2:01 a.m., my phone glow woke me again. Lock screen, nothing. The house made its deep body noises. Somewhere a pipe clocked gently, as if a marble rolled and tapped metal. The air felt cooler against my teeth when I breathed through my mouth. I stared into the dark and told myself, if something is going to happen, it will happen whether I watch or not. Which is not encouragement. It's surrender. Morning brought sunlight like a diluted medicine, and another set of photos. 2:17 a.m., 5 of them, darker than before. The first, me, sleeping. The second, me, sleeping, mouth open slightly, which made me hate myself. The third, me, but with the edge of the closet door in the frame, and it was open. The fourth, just the closet shelf, a blur, and the fifth, the ceiling again, streaked by my own breath, probably fogging the lens. Except that's not how phones work. I checked the closet. The lock was slid. The top shelf had dust lines where the textbooks had been moved half an inch and replaced. My palms went damp all at once. I wiped them on my pillowcase without thinking. Later, I saw the smear there and felt weirdly ashamed for having left evidence of how I felt. Would you have called the police? For what unexplained photography? Would you have called your landlord? Hi, Will. Quick question. Did you hide a mask in the basement and break into my locked bedroom to take pictures of me wearing it in my sleep? Would you have moved out? I wanted to. But where do you go with a thing like that? If it follows, you've simply traded your bad ending for another one with worse lighting. Instead, I bought a doorstop wedge made of rubber. I bought one of those cheap motion sensor nightlights that plug in and only glow when something moves. I bought a roll of painter's tape. I taped a hair across the closet door seam like I was 13 and spying on my siblings. I set my phone face down and told myself I would not look in the morning. I looked in the morning. 2 photos. Torsiam the first. The nightlight had been tripped and glowed, and my face was lit like I was being interviewed. In the second, the nightlight was off, and you could see the sliver of hallway light under my door, even though it should have been dark in the hall. The hair on the closet seam was broken, which means nothing if you believe in drafts. I told Nate a version of it. Not the photos. Not the mask. Just, dude, my house is creepy as hell. He laughed and did the hands-up woo ghost thing because that's what a friend is for. To prove that if they can mock the fear, then the fear can't own you. He offered me his couch. I almost said yes. But some stubborn part of me didn't want to abandon my bed to something else's idea of where I should sleep. That is the pettiest hill I've ever chosen to die on. I regret that. The next step was stupid, and so of course I did it. I moved the mask back to the dresser. I angled it toward the bed. See? I said out loud as if the house needed me to narrate. Art. I sat on the bed and opened the camera app. I took a photo of the mask on the dresser at 11:53 p.m. I took another at 11:54 p.m., zoomed. I turned the phone toward myself and took a photo of my face. I made a joke grimace. My phone thinks it's smarter than me. It tagged my face with that little white square in both pictures. I turned off the light and tried to sleep like a man who has never heard a single story about a mask. I woke to silence so dense you could feel it press against your eardrums. A quiet that kept itself by force. The cold had crept in. My nose was cold. There's a part of your brain that wakes first and is only a listening animal, and that part of me was crouched and trembling. The night light plug lay dark. Something had tripped it earlier. There was the faint tail of warmth in the plastic, but it was off now. My phone was face down. The slats of the blinds cut paler lines across the wall that flickered and then stilled, like something outside had passed by, slow. I did not want to, but I flipped the phone over. 2:09 a.m., 3 new photos. The first was not of me. It was of the mask, close. The lens had found the curve of the cheek and the paint crack at the corner of the mouth. The second was of my door from too near the floor, like someone had crouched to look at the space beneath. The gap glowed bright from the hall light. In the third photo, the camera faced my bed, but I wasn't in it. The exposure had dragged, causing a soft motion blur. In the blur was a suggestion of a shoulder leaving the frame, and the pillow was empty. I felt a sudden nausea like a missed step. I scrolled and found nothing else at 2:09 a.m. I locked the phone and stared at my hand, because seeing my hand meant I was awake and in this place and not in the place where I was just a figure in someone else's gallery. I got up. I turned on the overhead light and blinked into the cheap yellow. My door was locked. The chair in the corner was where it always had been. My closet hair trap had fallen uselessly to the carpet. In the hallway, the light was on. I hadn't left it on. The switch was in the up position. The air smelled like someone else's cologne. Faint, a spice you can't name and don't want to confess you like. My chest felt too tight and I realized I was holding my shoulders shoved up against my ears. I made my arms hang. That didn't help. I started to do alibis for myself. I checked my call log, no calls. Texts, none sent after 12:01 a.m., phone battery usage. The camera app had been open from 2:12 to 2:17 a.m. I screenshot that because I am the kind of person who reports facts to myself so I can pretend there will be a rational trial later. The next day I hunted for external sanity. I went to the hardware store because hardware stores are where problems become materials. I bought a cheap door camera, the kind that sticks to the wall and connects to your phone over Wi-Fi and costs less than you want to admit, because it means you're buying the idea of security, not security. I installed it above my bedroom door facing the room. I stuck another by the hallway pointing at my door. I turned off the hallway light and left it off to give the camera less glare. While I was at it, I slid the mask under the bed like I was scolding a dog. The air under the bed was colder. I got goosebumps to the knee. I slept with the cameras streaming on my phone screen the way you might sleep holding a knife you don't know how to use. I watched my own breathing. I drifted in and out, that half-sleep that feels like a road with no shoulder. Around 1:48 a.m., I woke with the feeling that someone had said my name in a room far away. The screen showed my room, gray and still. The underbed edge was a darkness you could fit a hand into. For a long minute, nothing changed. Then the underbed dark thickened. Not a shape exactly. It was the absence of shape. A patch where the pixels didn't agree with each other. It was like the air was full of fine hair and something breathed through it. I felt my chest tighten as if my ribs were measuring me. The little night light by the closet puffed on, though nothing had moved. The camera timestamp ticked. 1:52:03, 1:52:04, 1:52:05. In the bottom edge of the frame, the mask slid outward an inch and stopped. Not as if pushed, as if it had been persuaded by gravity it didn't believe in. I sat upright so fast my vision went to snow. The camera feed trembled in my hand. The mask slid another inch, turned a fraction, and then, with no visible force, tipped forward and fell face down on the floor with a dampish hush. The sound in the room was not the sound in the video. I heard the thud delayed by a second and my own tiny surprised noise layered on top of it, thin and embarrassing. I forgot how to swallow for a second. When the mask fell, a breath of cold air moved against my ankles from under the bed. It felt like opening a freezer. I swung my feet down and stood. Somebody else's courage would have been to run. Mine was to go still. I reached with the foot I trusted less and nudged the mask with my toes. Something was under it, something with volume. I bent, picked it up, and found nothing beneath. Only the shadow of the bed slats and the shirt I'd lost 2 weeks ago and pretended I hadn't. The smell rose stronger, rubber and something that had been damp and then dried many times. My fingertips tingled, a prickling like mild electricity, and I set the mask on the bed quickly, palm too sweaty to trust. The cameras recorded me being stupid and brave in the way that is just stupidity, with better lighting. In the morning, when I scrolled to review the footage, every bit of it from 151 to 204 glitched into smear and banding, as if the camera had become nearsighted. You could not see the mask slide. You could not see me sit up. You could only see a room fail to make itself into picture. The hallway cam showed nothing until 206, when the hall light turned on without a hand on the switch. I watched myself open the door, look out, and then look up right at the hallway camera with the expression of a man who has heard a word he knows, but not in that order. There was a false safety after that. I want to give you that because you should know how it tricks you. 2 nights with no photos. 2 nights when the nightlight glowed only when I moved. The hallway camera captured only the pass of my shadow to the bathroom and back. I slept heavy and woke with drool and judgment, and briefly, the thought that I had made a story out of fear because stories are how I make rent on myself. On the 3rd night, I closed the basement door at the top of the stairs and flipped the deadbolt for the first time because I realized I never had. That is such a small sentence. Let me say it again. I had never locked the door to the basement. I said out loud, "There," with the voice I use when I fix a leaky tap with tape and lies. I brushed my teeth and put my phone face down and decided not to look at the time even once, which is like deciding not to breathe more than the air wants you to. At 3:11 a.m., my phone buzzed once. Not a text. The calendar app reminding me there was nothing to do tomorrow, as if it were good news. I turned the phone over. The lock screen glowed, and for a split second, reflected in the glass, I saw a face that was not mine. Looking toward my face that was not mine either anymore because I had borrowed it for fear. I sat up and the room swayed. I don't remember deciding to move. I found myself in the hallway. The hallway carpet was cool and rough under my bare feet. The light was off, but down the stairs a thin gray glow seeped like dishwater, the kitchen window pulling what it could from a streetlight. The basement door was locked, my new deadbolt a little soldier in the dark. Behind the door, a soft bump from below as if something heavy had leaned its shoulder against a wall from the other side. The kind of sound you get when a washing machine hits its spin and an unbalanced load thuds. Except the machine upstairs wasn't running, and the air from under the basement door was cooler than the hallway air. It smelled like wet earth and plastic. I looked at the crack under the door and saw that the draft was not steady. It pulsed like breath. I think I stood there a long time without anything like a plan. My hands were shaking the way my dad's hands shook when he was hungry. I put my palm flat on the door. The wood felt normal. The thud came again, a slow slide of something on concrete. I told myself I would open the deadbolt and then go back to bed and tell a friend tomorrow. That's how I justified doing it. I needed to translate this sound into a thing with a name because named things don't ruin you as fast. I opened the deadbolt. The tiny click sounded like a shout. I turned the knob. The door didn't move. For one dizzy second, I thought the old wood had swollen in the frame. Then the door moved in a lazy inch as if considering me. Cold air shouldered up into the hall. The smell grew a tooth. Sweet, rotten old bananas, old clothes in a wet suitcase. The nightlight at the far end of the hall clicked on at the motion of the door. In that tiny pool of polite light, the shadow in the doorway was too much shadow. It had a thickness to it. It felt like finding a third hand on the banister. I closed the door. I locked it. I ran to my room and locked that door and put the chair under the knob, even though I knew it would do nothing, and maybe that is exactly why I did it. The morning had the hangover gloss things get when they should not still exist. I went to campus early because I thought people could rub the fear down to a smooth stone I could keep in my pocket. The noise of human bodies moving past me like fish in a current made me lightheaded with relief. But at 11:40 a.m., a notification. Google Photos had made a memories collage. 4 images. I opened it without thinking, and there they were. The 2:13 a.m. pictures resurrected by a machine that believed it was doing me a kindness. I never told the app to back those up. I never told it to remember that night for me. I stood in the back of a lecture hall watching my own sleep like it was a famous stranger, and had to sit down with my head between my knees because my heart was punching in the cage of my ribs, and I thought, if I didn't make the cage smaller, it would jump out. That afternoon, I went home early and stood at the top of the basement stairs in full sun. The daylight made the string for the bulb look harmless. Dust motes did their idiot dance. I pulled the string. The bulb warmed, then shone. I walked down, counting out loud like a child, 1, 2, 3. My voice sounded like someone else's voice in a room without furniture. At the bottom, the air was cooler. I could see my breath barely if I breathed out hard. The plywood panel I had removed leaned against the washer where I'd left it. Inside the cavity where the mask had been, there was a smear, like something oily had dried there and collected dust in a palm shape. That is what I told myself, a palm shape meaning human, meaning sayable. I reached in. The plaster flaked under my nails. I felt stupid and angry and something like love for the house because it had shown me its small secret, and I had made it worse. Behind me, upstairs, the front door opened and closed. The house took a breath and exhaled warmth down the stairwell. "Hello?" I called, no answer. Footsteps crossed the living room overhead. Slow, heavy as if boots, but then nothing. I went up 2 stairs and stopped. The light from the kitchen was wrong. It was greenish like aquarium light. When I reached the main floor, the kitchen window was bare. The curtain had been drawn aside. The light had hit the glass in a different angle. That was all. That was all. My hands were shaking anyway. You need a practical step here, I know. I tried to be practical. I called the landlord. "Will," I said with exactly the casual tone of someone who is standing in their kitchen trying not to cry. "Do you have a spare key?" He said, "Sure." He said, "Of course." He said he keeps it in his office and he hadn't been by recently. He laughed in the way men laugh to greased bearings a conversation. "You looking to make copies?" I said yes and no. I said there'd been some weird noises and I would feel better. He sighed and said those old bones like to complain in the fall. He told me a story about a tenant who swore she heard a man talk through the heating vents, and it turned out to be the neighbor's radio. He said, "Why, call me if it keeps up," and I said, "When it will," and he said, "When what?" And I said, "Nothing." That night I tried the couch at Nate's, I did. He fed me pasta and let me watch him scroll without asking too many questions. He joked about the mask because I told him that part. He said we should sell it on Marketplace and haunt some freshmen. I laughed and it hurt because laughter demands air and I was saving mine. I fell asleep on the couch to an action movie where men shouted in a language the subtitles made sensible. And I dreamed that the mask hung from a hook on a wall that was my wall. And every time I looked away, the hook had moved to a different wall without the mask moving on it. I woke with my heart hammering and looked at my phone. The lock screen showed a missed call from unknown at 3 a.m. It had rung once and stopped. I tapped the number. It said no voicemail left. I called back because I am a person who makes bad decisions when I'm half awake in a friend's living room. The call didn't connect. The bar of the signal pulsed and held steady and then cut out for a second like breath held. When I put the phone down, it lit and took a photo of the ceiling. No hands, I left Nate's at dawn. The city was the coldest blue. I tried to tell myself this would be funny in 6 months. I have never been good at guessing the future. Do you want the part where I finally see it? Because that's coming and I wish it weren't. Back at the house, the front door didn't want my key. I had to jiggle it. That is human. That is mundane. I think I love the mundane so much because it puts a fence around your brain. Inside, the air was colder than outside. The hallway camera blinked its little red light at me like it was embarrassed. My bedroom door was closed and locked. I put my forehead against it and I can still feel the cool of the paint there if I think about it too long. I opened the door and the first thing I smelled was my own shampoo, and then the thin, plasticky note that meant the mask was not where I had left it. It sat on the pillow, face up, black eye holes hungry. Beside the mask, my phone lay face down. I didn't cross the threshold. I stood there and I said out loud, "Okay." I said it slowly. I think I was trying to talk to myself from far away. I picked up the phone from the hall. I didn't go in. My thumb shook on the sensor. The camera roll showed 8 new photos between 2:02 and 2:11 a.m., all taken inches above my bed. All of me, sleeping somewhere else. and yet the timestamp said the bed. In one, the mask was on my face and the edges didn't meet my skin. In another, just my mouth and the hollow curve between the lip and chin, strangely vulnerable in that tight framing. In the final photo, my eyes were open, and I was looking at the camera from too close and my pupils were blown and there was a reflection in them that was not the mask, and not a person, and not the nightlight. It was like a window where there isn't one, opening onto a darkness that had lines in it like stretched fabric. The phone buzzed in my hand. A new photo appeared as if sent by another app, except no app had sent it. It was of my hallway from behind me at that very second. You could see my shoulder, the ridge of my ear, and behind me, something like a figure but wrong at the edges as if the pixels were trying and failing to draw it. The smell of the mask moved past me, quiet and definite, and I heard a breath that was not mine. Not close, closer I ran. I wish I could tell you I walked with dignity. No. I ran down the stairs and out the front door without closing it. I ran across the yard, the grass stiff and crackling under my shoes, and into the street, where a bus hissed past and the driver looked at me with that universal look of not my problem. I stood under the bus stop's orange light and took inventory of my body the way you do after a near accident. 2 hands, 2 feet, mouth, throat, air going in, my phone in my hand, warm from me. The lock screen flashed awake and showed me myself in the black glass, and my heart moved from my throat back into my chest, but higher. I went to a cafe. I sat with my back to the wall because that is what you do when you're trying to tell yourself you're not prey. I drank coffee I could not taste. I booked a motel room 2 miles away with my debit card, the kind of room that has a window you cannot open, and a bedspread that is not really a color. I called Will. I told him I needed to break the lease. He sighed, a longer sigh than any I'd heard from him. "Kid," he said, and I hated kid in that moment because I was an animal and animals are older than kids. "You can't just..." I said I would pay October and November, and he stopped and I could hear him counting money in his head. And then he said, "Drop the keys in my mailbox," and I said, "There's something in the wall," and he said, "We all got something in the wall," and then he hung up like he had caught himself being too honest. At the motel, the sound of the highway through the sealed window was comforting, because it was a sound made by physics, not will. I slept with the TV on because TV voices fill the shape of a room like foam. I dreamed nothing, I remember. I woke to the phone buzzing with an unknown number. It buzzed once and stopped. If your phone ever rings once and stops, you shouldn't call back. I know that. I called back. It didn't connect. I set the phone on the bedside table and it lit, took a photo of the ceiling, and saved it to my camera roll with the timestamp 3 a.m. I will tell you there was nothing in the photo because that is true. I will also tell you the corner of the frame had a shadow in it that did not belong to anything in the room. Those two truths fight each other in me like dogs. In the morning, I went back one last time to hand over the keys. I did not go upstairs. I did not go to the basement. I slid the keys into Will's mailbox and stood on the porch I had thought of as mine, and did not look at the windows. The house looked like a face that has decided not to answer a question. I wanted to apologize to it. I wanted to accuse it. I did neither. I walked away and did not look back until I was at the alley, and then I looked back and the upstairs curtain in my old room moved. That could have been the heat coming on. The weeks after weren't dramatic. That's the worst part. The horror didn't crescendo into a scream that frees you. It flattened into a constant tone you stop hearing until you notice you are not sleeping right anymore. I changed my number. I bought a new phone. I turned off every auto backup and gave my photos manual permission like I was teaching a toddler to touch hot pans. The new phone took 3 ceiling photos in the first month on the night of the new moon. No app admitted to taking them. I'd wake at 2:11 a.m. with the feeling of someone leaning over my bed. Patience like a weight in the air, and the smell. Faint, almost polite. Like plastic that met breath in an old, dark room and decided to keep it. I didn't tell this to many people after Nate, and Nate eventually stopped asking. The way friends do when they want you to be okay enough to keep showing up for them. One night, drunk, he texted, "You ever think maybe you took those photos?" And I wrote yes and left it unsent for 20 minutes and then deleted it. Guilt is a weird mirror. You catch yourself at angles you didn't expect. I still think about that butter knife and the way that board gave and how easy it was to make a space for something. I saved one photo. I don't open it. It chills my phone when I scroll past the thumbnail, a physical drop of temperature that isn't a real thing but feels like one. In it, my eyes are open and the black of the mask's eyes reflect my face, and inside mine there is that window where no window should be. Sometimes when I wake to my phone lighting the ceiling, I think of how the pupil opens to let in more night. And I wonder if that's all a mask is, a promise that if you look through, what looks back will be grateful. If you want advice, here's mine. Don't keep things the house gives you even if they are free. Don't answer unknown calls that stop after one ring at 3 in the morning. And if you find a cracked mask behind a wall and your phone starts showing you a life you don't remember living, do not tell yourself it is a joke. Jokes keep the dark from sticking, but only to your tongue. I'm in a different city now. No basement. Windows that shut like they mean it. I still don't look under the bed without turning on the light. And I still wake sometimes with that thin plastic smell in the room. A coolness at the ankles like a door has opened on a lower floor. The phone will be lying face down, perfectly still. When I flip it, there will be nothing on the lock screen. Just 2:13 a.m., late as ever, and the faintest echo of breath that isn't mine, stopping when I listen. If your phone ever rings once and stops, don't call back. The first thing I remember is the pause, not the words. Those came a heartbeat later, but the stretched, papery pause on the line, like someone leaning too close to a microphone and forgetting what breathing sounds like. There was an entire room of us waiting for a laugh, and instead we got a quiet that felt like the inside of a closet. Then the old woman finally whispered as if she were speaking through folded curtains. "I told you not to call again." We laughed. Of course we laughed. It was Halloween, and we were drunk on cheap rum and the idea that the world was still a place where you could dial strangers and nothing mattered afterward. We laughed because none of us wanted to be the one to say I don't like that. And later, when we learned that the number had been disconnected since 1998, we laughed again, though it sounded more like clearing our throats. Would you have done the same? I live in a narrow apartment over a bakery on Maple Street, in a town where leaves look like ash in streetlight and everyone knows what time the last bus sighs through the square. The nights get cold fast here, sharp air that sneaks under window frames and smells faintly like old sugar. On Halloween last year, a storm drifted in from the lake sometime after dusk. The rain never committed, just stuttered against the awning like fingers tapping a table. We turned off most of the lights and set our phones to airplane mode when the doorbell rang, then pretended not to be home. Mature, I know. By 11, there were 6 of us left. Me, my roommate Aaron, his girlfriend May, and 3 of Aaron's friends from the auto shop. Quiet guys with big hands and easy smiles who never took off their work caps. The oven downstairs had just cycled off for the night, and heat from the bakery rose through the floorboards in slow pulses, making the room smell like pre-dawn. Someone killed the playlist so we could try a game Aaron remembered from college, recording prank calls for proof. It was stupid, but harmless. The way cracking your knuckles is harmless until the morning you can't quite straighten one finger anymore. We decided on themes, pizza places exes, numbers we thought were landlords. May, who was kinder than anyone I know, hated the idea and said she was just going to listen. Aaron opened a notes app and made a list, then switched to voice memos. "All right," he said, smiling into the glow. "Let's make memories we can delete in the morning." The kitchen bulb flickered once, a soft pulse. We took turns phoning the anonymous. When they didn't answer, we added them to the myth of people who must be out somewhere living better lives than ours. When they did, we tried to be funny without being cruel. The recorded files stacked up. Halloween call 001.m4a, Halloween call 002m4a, little timestamps like insect legs, 2307, 2312, 2316. A car went by outside with bass turned low, the kind you feel in your ribs. The air in the apartment thinned. Our laughter sounded too loud in it. Every few minutes, the radiator clanged like silverware in a drawer. It was around 11:28 p.m. when Aaron found the number. He was scrolling deep into a list he claimed he'd gotten off some forum. Old regional exchange numbers that had been reassigned, deadlines, seasonal businesses. "This one's funny," he said. "Says payphone, Mayfair Station. Those don't even exist anymore." In the moment before he pressed call, I had this brief, stupid image. A payphone standing among weeds where the train station used to be. Its booth glass crazed with spiderweb cracks, receiver at half-mast like a black tongue. The rain outside made a hush that filled the picture. Then the start tone beeped and the picture folded away. He put it on speaker and set the phone on the coffee table. The room fell into that kid magic quiet of waiting for a trick to work. It rang once, then again, the kind of ring that sounds like it's echoing down a long hallway. On the third ring, it answered. At first, I thought it was just static, except it wasn't random. It breathed. A thin, papery hiss in, hiss out like a person trying not to be heard in a library. Then that voice, dry as mothballs. I told you not to call again. We burst into nervous laughter. Relief, really, because anything would have been worse than silence. Aaron said into the air, "Sorry, wrong number," and ended the call, already grinning at us. The grin died slowly on his face like someone letting the air out of a balloon. My phone lit up on the coffee table with no notification. Just lit. Then dimmed. The room smelled faintly of damp wool. I remember saying something stupid like, "She's sassy." I remember thinking about my grandmother, who would have told us to pray. I remember May pulling her knees up to her chest and smiling so we wouldn't ask if she was okay. One of the guys, Luis I think, said, "Play it back." So we did. Aaron tapped the voice memos file and held the phone between his palms like it was cold. The recording started with our muffled chuckling, the ring, and then nothing. A flat bit of tape, gentle room tone, barely their radiator ticks. It went on for 6 seconds too long, the way a song goes on too long after it fades. No voice, no whisper. Aaron scrubbed the slider back and forth. You know the moment when you feel your throat close a little? Like your body is trying to make itself smaller? I felt that listening for something that had been there and wasn't there anymore. Maybe it didn't catch it, May said. Speaker? I think voice memos drop sometimes. Yeah, Aaron said. Yes, sir. He sounded like someone satisfying himself with a mechanical explanation he didn't wholly believe. It's fine. It was just a prank. Somebody messing with the line. The bulb flickered again. Have you ever heard something that shouldn't exist and then a second later had to live inside a room where no one else believed it? I don't recommend it. We kept going because not knowing how to stop is a kind of momentum. The next few calls were normal. Someone cursed at us. Someone else told us they had a sick kid and to please not do that. May left the room to get water and came back wiping her eyes with the sleeve of Aaron's hoodie. We pretended not to notice. At 11:43 p.m., my phone vibrated once in my pocket. Aaron's phone was still on the table. He looked at me. I pulled mine out and saw a single missed call notification. No contact name. Just a 10-digit number that started with our area code and ended in 3471. Duration, 0:1. Time, 23:43. No voicemail. What? I said, trying to sound bored. I felt my pulse hit the inside of my wrists. Air from the bakery rose through the floor again and then stopped. Like even the heating system wanted to hear what we'd do next. Call it back, Aaron said. Don't, May said. I called it back. It rang once and stopped, not like someone sent it to voicemail. Stopped, mid-ring as if a hand covered the bell. I took it off speaker and held it to my ear. For a second, nothing. Then very faintly, like sound traveling through old wood, the breathing, not the messy normal kind with little throat clicks and hitches, but the practiced kind of someone who has heard a recording of themselves and is trying to improve. Hello? I said, because that's what you say. The sound kept breathing. It wasn't creeping or escalating. It was just patient. There's a texture to silence that's almost a sound. If you sit very still, you can hear the house around it. The fridge's tiny throat, the wet tack of the streetlight outside, the muffled neighbor movement overhead like cautious shoes. This silence was different. This silence sat right behind my ear. The call ended without a click. I pulled the phone back. The screen had gone dark by itself like it had looked away first. When I woke it, there was nothing new. The last entry in my call log read, 10:31-23:43, unknown, missed, 0-1. Would you think I was kidding if I told you that in that moment I could smell the bakery downstairs again? Just a thread of scorched sugar, like someone opening a door for a second? Someone's screwing with us, Luis said. He stood up too fast and hit his knee on the coffee table. His cap had a stain on the brim that looked like a burned leaf. Some app. They have those. Yeah, Aaron said. Yeah, we probably hit like a relay number or something. His face went back to technical. Relays. Spoofing someone with nothing better to do on Halloween. I'm going home, May said. as lightly as she could make it sound. She slipped on her boots without bending the laces. I feel mean. I don't know why we're doing this. Aaron moved to hug her and she let him. Her hair smelled like the shampoo you buy when you feel guilty. I thought that was that. Then our apartment door clicked after she left, and 5 seconds later it clicked again. We all heard it. You know the way an old door takes its time to latch, tongue-finding socket? Wood remembering how to line up. 3 seconds. 4. Then the small mechanical keystroke of it catching. It did that twice, must have bounced, Luis said. He was sweating, and it made his aftershave too sweet. I walked to the door and put my hand against it. The wood was cold. The hallway light beyond the peephole stuttered, the way our bulb had. I opened the door. The hallway was empty. The light above May's head as she went down the stairs was steady and soft. I closed the door. Click, 3 seconds, it clicked again. You tell yourself a building does this sometimes. You tell yourself air pressure changes when someone opens the back door for trash. You keep telling yourself that, because the alternative is standing there counting the ticks between its decisions like it's a person. We called it a night not long after. The guys left in a tight group, necks hunched against the drizzle, shoulders set like linemen. Aaron and I washed the few dishes we'd used, though neither of us talked about why we chose to do it then. The floor was warm under my bare feet for the last time before the heat cut for good. I climbed into bed at 12:17 a.m. according to the blue digits on my nightstand clock. I couldn't stop thinking of the voice. Not what it said, "I told you not to call again," but the way it had occupied the room like a moth drawn to a porch bulb that doesn't cast light so much as hold it. I didn't fall asleep easily. Every time I drifted, some mechanism in me started up, checking locks, replaying rings. At 3:04 a.m., I sat up. The apartment had that middle-of-the-night lay of sound, a deep refrigerator thrum, a whisper of road, nothing else and everything else. My phone lit up on the nightstand with no buzz, then slid back into blackness. I picked it up. One new notification, backup complete. The phone had finished its automatic sync. I set it back down and exhaled. You know that thing where your own reflection in a darkened screen looks like a ghost because you're expecting one? I laughed at myself, which is a good way to shoo one feeling and invite another. That's when my phone rang. Not the alert chirp of a calendar, not a friendly text ping. A ring once, then it stopped. The time was 03:05 exactly. The digits too even, like the earth had paused to set them. I don't remember deciding to answer. My thumb must have moved on its own. The call connected to nothing. Then the silence oiled into breathing, and something else under it. A sound like paper being turned in a book or a very old person smoothing a sheet. "Stop," I said. I didn't know who I was talking to. "Stop," the breathing obliged. It became so gentle that I wondered if it was mine, echoing somehow, though that's not a real thing. Then a voice, not the old woman's this time, but a younger one. Maybe mine pitched down, maybe Aaron's fed through a filter. Low, like someone crouched under the couch. "You dialed this," it said. "You invited it in," the call ended. I checked my log. There was no record of any call at 03:05. The radiator tapped once like a blind person finding a doorframe. Normalcy tried to crawl back up into the morning. That's what mornings do. They smother the theater dreams of the night and lay out a clean shirt. I woke to rakes on sidewalk and the regular bakery noises below. Trays sliding, a joke traveling up through the vents in a language I barely knew. The oven's metal hymn. Light came in through the kitchen window in a solid beam, dust like constellations. If I'd had better self-control, I would have let the world be normal for another hour. Instead, I opened my call history. I scrolled past the confirmed blocks. Mom, Aaron, pizza place. Then there was the number from the night before, the first missed call at 23:43. I tapped it. It opened in the details view, which I'd never really looked at before because why would I? Here's what it showed. Unknown 5555, 013-3471, 03124, 2343. Missed, Bradura 1, 103124. 2344, outgoing. Area 1024, 2347, missed. 001, Teddy 3T1, 243. 5352, missed, Dorotel 1. There were 2 extra missed calls time-stamped after the one I remembered. Nested like thorns I hadn't felt. I hadn't heard my phone ring for those. The durations were all Duro 1, which is nothing and also not nothing. Under info there was a gray line, No caller ID information available. That was normal. What wasn't normal was that the block this caller option was missing. There was only share contact, and even that hung for a long time when I tapped it like it didn't want to be touched. I Googled the number. You know the page, the worthless aggregate sites that tell you a number is either spam or a legitimate electrician, depending on which disgruntled user reviewed it. The first hit was a forum thread from 2011 about a now-closed train station one town over, Mayfair Station. The thread had a grainy photo embedded, a boarded-up ticket window, and off to the side a payphone on a steel pole with an aluminum hood. A piece of paper stared through the scratched plexi with "out of service" written in black marker, and below that, the number 555133471. The page had that abandoned website smell, ads for expired products, comments with broken avatars. The last reply was from 7 years ago. They tore down the payphone in '98. Kids were smashing them for quarters. Stop scaring people. I clicked until I reached a scanned newspaper piece. Telecom to disconnect final payphones in county, October 12, 1998. Among the listed numbers under Mayfair Station was the same one we'd dialed. Discontinued service. The parentheses around it looked like 2 fingers pinching something. Maybe you think I chased a coincidence. Maybe you would have stopped there. I should have. Instead, I texted Aaron a screenshot of the forum post. He didn't reply. He is a fast texter. His bubble usually jumps up before I'm done typing. That morning, his silence pressed down on me like too many blankets. At 9:22 a.m., I walked the long way to work and ended up at the chain-link fence around the old Mayfair lot. The station had been leveled. All that remained was a rectangle of darker pavement where the building had been, and a few stumps of bolts. Weeds had made their decisions, narrow red-green stems pushing through tar-like veins. There wasn't even a stump where the payphone pole had been. A gull laughed somewhere high and away, the sound like a screw falling in a vent. The wind off the lake had teeth. It cut through my shirt and raised the hair on my arms. It carried a smell like wet newspaper. You know that feeling you get when you realize you came to a place expecting some kind of script, and there isn't one, and you're going to have to write it yourself? I stood there holding onto the fence with both hands and felt it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One short vibration, then nothing. I pulled it out. No new notifications. The screen reflected a pale, indirect version of me, and over my shoulder, the empty lot. For a half second, something else, just a trick of light, seemed to stand where the payphone would have been. Tall and slim and patient. I didn't tell anyone at work because the story sounded ridiculous, and because the bakery smell that hung on me all day felt suddenly like a kind of borrowed comfort I didn't want to waste. Around noon, Aaron finally texted, "Sorry, bad sleep." "You good?" I typed, deleted, typed again, then sent him a photo of the chain-link fence. "Just being stupid," I wrote. "Everything's fine, everything was not fine. But pretending sometimes buys you a few hours where you can eat a sandwich." At 3:17 p.m., while I was sweeping behind the counter, Aaron sent me an audio file. "Halloween call 035-M4A, his note read. "Listen with headphones." I waited until my break and put on my cheap earbuds, which squeaked a little when they settled in. The audio started with our living room's room tone, laughter, a distant car. Then the ring. Then our laughter again. Then after the part where the voice should have been, a noise I hadn't noticed before. Under the hum and clink, a thin, dry rasping, as if a finger inched along the inside of the microphone. It made the tiny hairs in my ears stand up, and as I listened, something else came up from under it right at the edge of hearing. Like those 18-22 kHz only teenagers can hear this test files. A word. Not spoken exactly, formed by the timing of the rasp. "Don't." I replayed the section 3 times because that's what we do when we want reality to be both real and optional. The second time I heard nothing. The third time the sibilants were unmistakable. I texted Aaron, "Is this a joke?" He wrote back, "Not by me. Can you come home early?" The sun went down at 5:42 p.m. in this part of the world last Halloween. I know because I looked it up then, like knowing small, precise facts could anchor me. The power dipped for a heartbeat at 6:13 p.m., the ovens hiccuping downstairs, the overhead lights in the bakery dimming to brown, and then winking back to life. A customer joked about ghosts. The smell in the air shifted from warm sugar to faint metal and ozone, which is the smell that says it's going to rain and we're all wired parts. I got home at 6:58. Aaron was sitting on the couch with his laptop open to our building's security camera portal. He'd gotten the password from our landlord once when the washing machine had been stolen out of the basement. The footage was the color of aquarium water. He had the timeline scrolled to around 11:30 p.m. the previous night. "Watch," he said, voice taut. The living room camera was a square blink into our own lives, our bodies distilled into posture. We watched ourselves lean over the coffee table, faces ghost white from our phones. We watched the phone lying there ring and jump a fraction. We watched Aaron tap the screen. Our recorded laughter had been scrubbed away by the portal's blank soundtrack. I tried to lip-read old me and gave up. Then something small. When the phone rang the second time, the lamp next to the couch dimmed exactly as the ring peaked. A breath later it rose back. On the third ring, dear God, the shadow behind Aaron's head stretched and then seemed to hesitate before returning to itself. Like light traveling through a thing that doesn't want to be named. "Could be the camera's exposure," Aaron said, already writing off his own observation. His voice shook just a little. "Auto something." I rewound to 12:17 a.m., when I remembered going to bed. Nothing. Just a square of empty living room. At 03:05, when my non-existent call came, the living room camera caught the door to the hallway gently shifting. It stayed shut. The bottom edge of it darkened like a tongue of shadow nudged against the threshold. Then it was normal again. No clicks, no handle move. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't notice. We both sat there listening to the quiet of the apartment and to our own shallow breaths. The radiator popped like a knuckle. The bakery heat was gone now. Cold came up from under the floors. If we stop talking about it, Aaron said, maybe it stops. "Maybe," I said. "But don't you want to know why she said that?" He looked at me for a long time. "Who?" "The voice," I said, like it should have been obvious. "The old woman." His eye twitched. "You heard a woman?" "What did you hear?" He looked down at his hands. "A man." A freighted silence sprawled between us like a net. Even the fridge quieted to hear it. The false safety arrived the way safety always does. Sudden competence. I called our phone provider. A woman named Kim, who sounded like she'd had a day and was committed to being kind anyway, told me that spoofed calls were common, especially around certain holidays. She gave me a case number, HT84521, suggested I enable silence unknown callers and added a network-level spam block for us. When I mentioned that the number was disconnected, she said, "Yeah, our system shows it as a legacy NYNEX asset with a tertiary flag, but these spammers are resourceful. Don't worry, it can't actually connect to you." A thing in me unclenched. I laughed with her. Aaron's shoulders dropped a notch. He put the kettle on like a human being in a kitchen, in an apartment in a flat world where phone calls had explainable prefixes. We watched a stupid movie. We ate popcorn that tasted slightly like the bag it came in. Every so often my phone lit up with nothing and I imagined only that the air near the door was cooler than it should be. We went to bed at a normal time like normal people. I brushed my teeth too hard and my gums bled a little and the taste made me feel alive. I don't think I fell asleep. I think I drifted in a shallow place just inside the dark, the place where your diaphragm still notices every breath. At 12:01 a.m., my phone lit up. It did not ring. The lock screen showed 2 new voicemail indicators and then, almost immediately, they flickered away. When I unlocked it, my voicemail inbox was empty. I don't know how I knew that both messages had been new. I think the way the notifications sat on top of everything else made their age feel loud. I also knew, without knowing how, that there should be 2 new audio files somewhere that wasn't the inbox. You know the way a dream hand finds the light switch? I found files audio, and there they were, blandly labeled by the automatic transcription service that apparently had tried and failed to parse them. Unknown voicemail M4A007. Transcription unavailable. Unknown voicemail M4A004. Transcription unavailable. My thumb hovered. I played the first one. It began with the harsh angle of a phone picking up a call, a quick shape of room noise, and then the old woman's breath, those dry folds working. There was no hello. There was the sense of someone starting mid-sentence. If you can imagine someone turning their head inside a small space, that's what it sounded like. Then a whisper, as if confiding through a wall that had been there for years. "You called me first." Click. I played the second one. There was only breathing at first, softer this time, conscious. Then a sound unlike words or static, something like the mouth of the receiver being smoothed by a palm. And then my name. Not perfectly. The L got caught and softened, like someone whose tongue had learned different shapes. But it was my name, in my own voice. I stopped the playback because my mouth had dried out so fast I couldn't swallow. I didn't wake Aaron. Instead, I went to the kitchen because the air felt thicker there, because the dark seemed somehow more honest with the streetlight pushing through it. I stood still and felt the cool seeping through the tile into my soles. Somewhere below, the bakery compressor cycled. A car hissed by. In the reflection on the window over the sink, my face floated like a coin in a well. The phone lit once more, quietly. A new notes entry had been created. I hadn't opened notes, the title field said, call back. The body was a 6-digit time in a format I've only ever seen on train schedules, and hell, Arrow 3, Noro 5, tomorrow. The next day was a Saturday. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't answer calls from anyone. I watched as the day approached 3:05 p.m. and then passed it, and when nothing happened, I felt stupid for thinking it would. The last sunlight of the day went long, the dust in it soft and patient. That night I set my phone face down. I set a real alarm clock. I told myself that choosing not to follow a note someone else placed on my phone was a kind of autonomy. At 3:05 a.m., of course at 3:05 a.m., I woke without the alarm. Not woke, exactly. Sat up, already there. The apartment had been so still for so long that the air seemed to crackle lightly when I moved. It wasn't cold. It was the kind of not warm that knows your bones. I stood stupidly, walked to the living room, and looked at the door. I put my ear to it. The wood had a smell like damp cardboard and old varnish. The peephole was a black coin in front of my eye. I don't know how long I stood like that. Would you have opened it? I didn't. I went back to bed. I lay on my side facing the wall and felt little sparks of adrenaline pop through me until they ran out. That's what panic is. A finite chemical that your body spends whether anything happens or not. At 3:05 exactly, the door gently clicked. 3 seconds drained through a straw. Then it clicked again. I slept with the lamp on after that. We stopped making calls. We stopped talking about it except in sideways comments like, "You good?" in doorways. May didn't come over much. I told myself the story would become an anecdote in a few weeks, then a dull memory, then an exhale. You either believe in time or you don't. 2 weeks later, after the bakery replaced their compressor and the air smelled different, the number called again, but this time to Aaron while he was at work at the shop around lunch. He texted me a screenshot of his call log, the number at the top like a bruised fruit, durations all 001 again. Then he went silent the rest of the day. I found him on the stoop at 7 p.m., elbows on his knees. He had his phone face down beside him like a dead pet. It said my name, he said, and then covered his face. May had left him a few days earlier for reasons that were perfectly sane and had nothing to do with any of this, which is somehow worse. That's not a voice, he said, muffled. It's like the idea of a voice. Like something we imagined and it got stuck in the wires. We bought a prepaid burner from the corner store. We swapped numbers and didn't give them to anyone but each other for a while, because we are ridiculous animals and want control. The old number we let sit in a drawer. Once late at night, I powered it on to check for a ride receipt I needed for my taxes. And as the lock screen brightened, the tiny voicemail icon in the corner winked on like an eye and then off again. I powered the phone down so fast I fumbled it, and it slid under the couch in the soft mechanical way of a thing becoming irretrievable for an hour. If I'm making it sound like weeks of unbroken dread, good. It felt like that. But dread also has to do laundry. I went back to work. I stood in a line at the DMV. I let myself press the elevator button with my knuckle instead of my sleeve again. There were days where the most uncanny thing that happened to me was a pigeon in the square, going somewhere with purpose. Then Halloween came around again. Maple Street was itself. Kids in plastic. Teenagers in thrifted leather and false eyelashes, grown-ups holding hot drinks and trying not to look like they were counting down to bedtime. Wind pushed the empty candy wrappers in their slow races along the curb. The bakery downstairs leaned into the day, put out tray after tray of glazed skulls and spiderweb cookies and little tart tatins that looked like autumn had been convinced to hold still. Someone in our building decorated the vestibule with cheap cobwebs and a motion-activated bat that went off whenever the door opened, which meant it screamed like a toy whenever anyone came home. By then, I was the person who doesn't answer unknown numbers, which is the same as being someone who is not curious in a way that hurts. I came home early, locked the door, and put on old episodes of a sketch show that felt like an artifact from a world where phones were just phones, and no one said content. At 11:28 p.m., exactly 1 year to the minute since, Aaron swiped right on the first stupid call. The apartment went as quiet as places never are. It's hard to explain if you haven't felt it. It's like all the little sounds agree as a committee to pause. There's a weight to it, a pressure on the eardrum that makes you swallow. My phone lit up on the coffee table. It did not ring. I knew suddenly that if I touched it, I would slide back into something I couldn't climb out of. I left it there face up. The screen's light moved on the ceiling like a pale fish. 3 seconds. The door clicked and then clicked again. There's a thing fear does when it runs out of humor and then dignity. It builds you a schedule. I went to the door and pressed my palm against it, and felt nothing but the smoothness of paint. I spoke through it. I said in a voice I barely recognized, "What do you want me to do?" Here's what came back, not from the hallway, because that would be a ghost story, but from my phone on the table, speaker on without my asking, "Don't call again." The voice was the old woman's, but fuller, less paper dry, like someone who had spent a year practicing words. It sounded tired more than angry. I picked the phone up like it could break if I didn't hold it like a bird. The call interface was active, but the contact said unknown caller and the duration read 0.0, as if time itself refused to be complicit. On the screen under the audio output controls, a tiny line of text I'd never seen before, small as a label inside a shirt, connected via legacy. "Okay," I said, "because that is the one truly human answer to implacable things. Do you understand?" The voice whispered. The sibilants rasped like fingers on cardboard. A smell rose from somewhere that was not the bakery downstairs and not the hallway, dry and sweet like paper warmed in a copier. "I think so," I said. And I did. I did, and also I didn't. The call ended by itself. The phone went black. When I woke it again, the lock screen background had changed to a plain, salt white texture with a hairline down it, like a piece of paper folded once and then unfolded and then smoothed. In the morning, I checked the call logs. There was nothing for 11:28 p.m., only 10:31:23:43 unknown, missed, 0:1:31:23:144 outgoing, 0:31:23:47 unknown, missed, 00:01:10:31:23:52, unknown, missed, 00:01I. Hadn't scrolled that far in a year, thinking if I didn't, time would brick over it. It's almost funny now how simple the arithmetic is. We called. We were told not to. We did it again, in the way that pressing a bruise again is doing it. After that, we were given the courtesy of instructions. Don't call again. And then we were asked to prove we understood. I haven't called back. But sometimes, very late, when my phone lights up by itself and the lock screen breathes once as if a hand passes over it, and the room grows silvery cold, I look at the door and I wait. Sometimes it clicks on its own and then its twin, and the timing holds between them like a head turned one way and then the other. Sometimes it doesn't. There's no pattern. You could make yourself sick finding one. The thing that changed in me wasn't the fear. It was the reflex, the knowledge that if I saw that number again, some part of me that wants to set a record straight would reach for it, and that my hand would hover and then choose to stay away. That's a different kind of person than I was. I still have the audio files. I haven't deleted them because it would feel like telling a story never happened. Once I played the first one in a loud room and nobody heard anything, and I felt almost free for the length of the clip. Then my phone vibrated once in my pocket, and the message on the screen when I pulled it out was the Notes app, open to a page I hadn't created. The title, "Are You Listening?" The body was just the time, 03:05. I glance at the clock now more than I used to. I walk faster when I pass the empty lot where Mayfair Station used to be. The bakery heat still comes up through the floorboard some mornings in the winter, and the sugar smell is so gentle it makes my eyes sting. On those days, I think I am safe. I also keep the old phone in a drawer I never open. When I moved apartments this summer, a different part of town, windows that look east, I carried the drawer itself to the car without taking it out, like a barely sleeping child. I'm telling you this because I think a story is a way to hand off heat. Because someone once told me not to call again and I need to say out loud that I listened. Because maybe that's the only clearing we can make. And because sometimes while I'm talking I can hear it if I stop. The breathing faint and patient as if it's been here all along, just waiting for my mouth to quiet enough to speak. If your phone ever rings once and stops, don't call back. I still don't know which part of that night was real, the miles of nothing, or the moment the map said we were parked in my own driveway, while my hands were welded to the wheel and the road outside the windshield kept going. We weren't doing anything cinematic. No graveyard dares, no stolen liquor. We were just two kids in a borrowed sedan, leaving a Halloween party where the scariest thing had been someone's dad dressed like a dentist. It had rained during the day and left the air wiped clean, like the world had been washed and put back wrong. My hoodie was damp along the cuffs. The heater in Riley's car clicked when it changed speed. The kind of ordinary you get nostalgic for later, after something takes it from you. We left early because Riley didn't want to drive late. He'd promised his mom. The plan was obvious. Back roads to avoid the main drag with checkpoints and drunk kids. I typed my address into his phone because his screen was spiderwebbed and unresponsive half the time. 32 minutes, it said, and drew a neon blue line through 2 state routes and a county road I knew from tractors and hay bales and that one Mexican place with no sign. Easy. 3 turns in. The road we were supposed to take had a wooden barrier across it, just 2 sawhorses and a swaying strip of reflective tape. The detour sign, handwritten, black marker, weirdly neat, pointed us left onto a narrower lane. Riley laughed, one that sounded relieved. "Shortcut," he said. "I'll take it." I didn't think anything about the lane at first. The blacktop was fresh, the lines bright, and the shoulder was wide enough that deer would have to commit to it. The sky was clear. The moon was thin as a crack in a door. The only oddness was the way the road didn't have a name on the little green sign. It was just blank metal, 2 silvery rivets on either end flashing as our headlights caught them. The heater made my eyes dry. When I blinked, I saw the afterimage of the dash clock, 12:11 a.m. For a while, we were quiet in that good way where silence is shared. Leaves skittered across the pavement like paper insects. Riley drove with one hand draped over the top of the wheel, the other on the slack of the cruise control stalk. We passed a mailbox like a steel jaw with no letters painted on it. The radio kept trying to lock onto stations and failing, slipping from song fragments into sand sound and back. "They should have put the sign back up," Riley said. But he was looking at the rearview mirror when he said it, like he expected someone to be there. Every 3 or 4 minutes, a smell like wet stone came through the vents. Not rot, not skunk or cow, just cold, the kind that makes the hollows in your teeth ache. At 12:19, the GPS piped up, "In 1 mile, turn left." The screen showed our little blue arrow floating along a white line. Fields were indicated on both sides, pale rectangles with no house icons on them. We hadn't seen a porch light in 10 minutes. The moon touched the road and made it look like a rewrite of itself, less real than its reflection. We passed a road on the left with no sign. Then another. They were cut across the fields like scars, each one clean, each one blank. The phone buzzed in its mount. The icon at the top flickered 5G. LTE, no service. G for a second and then settled on LTE. "You're going to miss it," I said when the map zoomed in like a camera tightening its shot. "There isn't a left," Riley said like it was a joke, and then he slowed because he'd seen it too. Another turn. Only when we got to it, the asphalt wasn't fresh anymore. It looked old. Spidery tar repairs. The edges crumbled. Our high beams lit up a road sign, shape of a rectangle, face of bare aluminum. The post looked brand new. The face looked polished smooth, like something had wiped it with a sleeve. Riley took the turn anyway. "It still knows where we are," he said. "It's just a glitch." We rolled deeper into not much. The road narrowed until there was barely room for the car and a ghost. Corn stubble rose on both sides, ragged as unshaved hair. Somewhere far away, an engine. Not a car. Not a plane. Bigger. Slower. The kind of sound that makes your bones think of the ocean even if you've never seen it. The clock said 12:26. My phone, in my pocket, warmed like a hand. I pulled it out to check the time because the car clock suddenly felt like something it could lie about. 12:02, my lock screen said. The minute ticked to 12:03. A text from my mom sat in the notifications. You home? Time stamped 11:49 p.m. I swiped open to reply and watched the bubble stutter. Gray dots appearing, disappearing like she was typing and then not. I typed soon and hit send. It spun a while. Then it said sent as text message. We passed a shape in the field. At first I thought it was a hay bale. Then I realized it was a refrigerator lying on its back. Door open to the sky. Its enamel gleamed like a tooth. There was no track in the earth where it had been dragged. The smell in the car changed. It wasn't whetstone anymore. It was laundry. Faint, that clean powder scent cheap soap has if you don't rinse it fully. I rubbed my thumbnail under my other nails because my hands had started to tremble, and my brain was trying to do something that felt normal. I think we should turn around, I said. It came out light like I was handing him gum. There's nowhere to turn, Riley said. He was right. The road had shoulders like cliffs. The fields pressed up close, a wall of stalks. The edges of the asphalt were abrupt, like the road had been laid down on top of the world without being attached to it. The temperature in the car ticked down 2 degrees. I didn't touch the dial. We went another mile. Then another. No driveways. No paper boxes. Only that blank, obedient pavement and the reflective hyphenations passing under us like a pulse. The radio found a voice and lost it. The voice had said something like after the break, and the break had been forever. At 12:33, the GPS voice said, in quarter of a mile, turn right. The map zoomed in so tight the road looked fat. The blue arrow rotated a degree to the left and then straightened up like it had been embarrassed to be seen moving at all. There was a rustle beneath the sound of the tires like cloth being handled in another room. We came to the right turn. The sign wasn't a sign this time. It was a pole with a flimsy plastic sleeve around it that should have held a paper notice, but there was nothing inside. The sleeve was scuffed. The dirt around it was smooth, like nobody had stood there in a while. The road we could turn onto looked exactly like the one we were on. Take it, I said, and when he didn't, I said, please. He took it. The headlights swung. The corn turned backbone and then ribs. Something small moved at the edge of the beam and then nothing did. It could have been a rabbit. It could have been the wind moving something that hadn't moved in a long time. The heater clicked hard enough I flinched. Every 3 or 4 paragraphs of this night I remember a detail that shouldn't stick and it takes the air out of me. The texture of the steering wheel cover was raised dots so your fingers didn't slip. My left foot had a grain of sand in my shoe that I couldn't shake down to the heel. The dome light flickered once like a throat clearing and then stayed dark. I don't know why my brain insists on those things. Maybe because they're the only proof it happened. The rest is what story? A memory infection? We drove a long time. I watched the time. The car said 12:44, my phone said 12:09. The map's ETA climbed by minutes. 33, 37, 41. I opened the recent calls list to see if I'd pocket dialed anyone, and there was an entry to Riley at 12:12 that apparently lasted 23 seconds. I didn't call him. I swear I didn't. What would I have said? Hey, I'm right beside you and we're fine? Do you smell that? He asked. We hadn't said anything for 10 minutes. My voice sounded dry when I answered. Clean laundry. No, he said. It's like... He put the window down an inch and the smell came in like a body entering a room. It was cold plastic. New shower curtain. Raincoat wrapper. We both cranked the windows up at the same time. The cabin pressure popped my ears. Riley laughed that laugh again, the relieved one, except this time it ended in a sound that wasn't a laugh. I could tell he was trying to keep me calm and the thought made me want to cry. I tried a trick I use when I think my brain is eating its tail. Narrate what's true. We are on a county road, I said. We got detoured. The GPS is glitching because of the trees. We're probably parallel to the highway and if we keep going we'll hit it. There's no reason anyone would make a fake road. We're not parallel to anything, he said. He said it very quietly as if not to wake something. And then he pointed, not ahead but up. Have you ever seen a plane you can't hear? The sky was lace thin that night and I could see stars all the way down to the horizon. Something darker than the dark was moving across them, blocking them out in a long, ruler-straight rectangle. It was too high to be a truck, too low to be a cloud. The shape took 8 seconds to cross the windshield. It didn't ripple. It didn't glint. It just erased what it moved over. Riley's hand tightened on the wheel hard enough for his knuckles to look like boiled chicken. "Okay," he said. Okay. The phone in the mount lit up with no notification. The home screen was a photo of Riley and his little sister on a roller coaster, both of them squinting and both of them trying to look braver than they felt. The screen dimmed. It lit again. The clock on it changed from 12:50 to 12:03 to 3:31, and then back, like the numbers were on a rotating sign nobody had told to stop. The map stuttered and repinned our blue arrow a half-inch to the left. The voice said nothing. The little text at the bottom that usually said, "Fastest route, normal traffic," said, "Saint R.T. no LTR, I see." We hit a curve, and I felt the centrifugal pull like a hand in my chest. The road carved between a run of old cottonwoods. The bark on them was pale, bone-shaped. In the headlights, the grooves looked like fingerprints. Something leaned out from between two of the trees. Just a shadow, just a shift, and then slid back. I reached for the lock button like a child. At 1:01 on the car clock, which had given up even pretending to match my phone, we saw a house. It was a relief even if it was the wrong kind, the relief of any human-made geometry. The porch light was on. The windows were lit. A flag hung limp in the night, just a rectangle. "We'll ask for directions," I said. "We'll turn around in their drive." My breath fogged the glass even though the inside temperature said 69 degrees. Riley slowed. The gravel on the driveway crackled under our tires like cereal, like it was dry in a way nothing else was. The porch boards were new. The light bulb on the porch was old enough to have a filament. Moths stuck to it like thumbprints. I could see a motion sensor near the door blinking red, even though we weren't moving yet. Riley put the car in park. The engine ticked, cooling. There was no car under the car's sound. There were no crickets. I think that's when I began to be afraid in the animal way instead of the teen way. The key stayed in the ignition because neither of us wanted even that small metal sound. "You go," he said. He meant it as a joke. He said kidding, but he didn't get out either. Then the porch light went out, not faded, not blinked. It was a cut. The house was a black square against a blacker sky. We both made small sounds. Riley's hand jerked toward the keys. It came back on, but it wasn't a warm porch bulb anymore. It was cold, white, whiter than white. It painted the car like hospital light. It made the dust on the hood visible as a film. The moths weren't there. The motion sensor didn't blink. I could see into the window beside the door now. There was a table. There was a bowl on the table. The bowl was empty. There were 2 chairs tucked under. Everything had a dust cover on it, plastic sheeting that reflected like new ice. Riley put the car in reverse. The gear shift did not click, it moved. The letters lit R and we rolled backward. Gravel popped. I watched the front door because I couldn't not. It wasn't that I thought it would open. It was that I thought if it did, I wouldn't be able to bear it. The porch light went out again. It stayed out this time. My chest felt tight like when you've been crying and then you stop before you're done. Back on the road, we didn't say what was that, because that question was a trap. We chose speed instead. 55, 60. The lane lines shivered past. Do you know the sound of someone breathing in a car when both of you are trying not to let the other hear it? It's the sound of paper being squeezed. I heard it and then realized it was not either of us. It was behind us. Faint. The sound of breath across a fabric mouth. I turned so fast my seatbelt bit my neck. There was no one in the back seat. The darkness between the front seats looked heavier than it should. Like a lap you could sit on if you were brave enough to imagine that. I did the thing you do when you think there's someone in your back seat. The thing that belongs to sitcom jokes and also police reports. I reached back fast and patted the air until my hand hit cold. The cold wasn't a person. It was colder than the rest of the air. A pocket of it like a freezer left open. The touch of it made my fingers ache to the joints. I yanked my hand back. A few seconds later, the phone in the mount vibrated hard enough to rattle. One buzz, then nothing. No notification. At 1:14 car, my phone took a video on its own. I didn't know until later. It was 15 seconds of the footwell, my sneaker laces, the shadow of my knees, and the bottom of the glove box. At second 7, there was a voice in it that wasn't either of ours. It said my name. It said it the way a teacher says it when your paper is on their desk and there's something on it they don't understand. I only mention this now to be precise, to give you an anchor if you need one. Because by the time we found the sign, I was ready to believe anything. The sign wasn't a highway marker. It was one of those blue and white reflective numbers people have nailed to their fence posts for emergency services. It was tilted. The paint had flaked. The numbers were familiar, and it took a full 4 seconds of watching. Our lights rake across them before my brain accepted what my eyes had given it. 1427 on that was the start of my address. Must be the county changed something, Riley said, in a voice that would have sounded fine anywhere else, a tone of weird you use when a teacher calls your mom by her first name. He had a way of softening the world. He was doing it now like someone trying to save a long table from tipping. Slow down, I said. We were already slowing. The road curved. The corn turned into pasture on the left. There was a tree with a tire swing. There was a mailbox with a dent in the top where my cousin had backed into it last summer. There was the shape of my house farther back than it should be. The porch light was on. It was a warm light. It was the color it should have been. The driveway was gravel, and the wheel ruts were where they'd always been. I knew those ruts like I knew the angles of my own face. The car drove past them. Our GPS said, "You have arrived." The word "arrived" scanned across the top of the screen like a mistake. The blue arrow pointed ahead. The gray road behind it was labeled with my street name. The gray road behind us was too. The little red pin that marked home sat directly on top of the dots that represented us. "Stop," I said. "Stop, stop," Riley did. The car idled. The tack jittered. In the rearview mirror, in the condensation there, I watched the yellow eye of the porch light burn. The shape by the porch, my dad's grill covered, looked like a fat man leaned against the rail. The wind picked up just enough to make something in the pasture clink the way a gate chain does, lazy and liminal. "Okay," Riley said. "Okay, it's a..." He looked at me and the relief in his laugh was gone. Do we turn around?" "What if we don't?" I asked. I didn't know I'd say it until I did. It sounded like fear dressed up as bravery, or maybe the other way around. My head throbbed behind my right eye. The heater had settled into a low, constant hum that made the floor vibrate. "What if we just keep going? Because we might not get a credit for completion," he said, and we both laughed like you'd laugh at your own eulogy if you heard it and no one knew you were there. He put the car in drive. The tires rolled forward slow. The blue arrow on the map turned into a dot. The dot did not move. The map did. The lane lines felt farther apart. The road began to look like it was drawn a half-inch above the world. The edges didn't catch gravel anymore. There was no gravel. There was the surface, the reflective paint, and then the black of everything else. It was like driving over handwriting. At 1:23, my mom called. The phone rang once and stopped. The missed call showed in red with a time stamp, 1:23 a.m. The recents list said it was from home. The call detail later would show the tower pinged near an intersection we'd passed hours before the party. Later is doing a lot of work in that sentence. It suggests there was a straight line from then to now. There wasn't. We passed a figure on the shoulder. I didn't see it fully. You never do, but the impression stayed like light in your eyes when you look at a lamp. A person, tall, standing too close to the pavement, head turned as if to watch us. No reflective striping, no flashlight. We were past before I could make my throat work. "Did you?" I started, and he said no. We drove faster. The heater blew. The air tasted like the inside of a winter boot. The smell of laundry came back sharper, like a coin pressed to the tongue. It had an edge now. I put my hand to the vent and felt a temperature drop so steep it made me hiss. The radio cut in again with a voice. It said, "You're tuned to," and then it said, "Weather." And then it said, "After the break." And then it hunted and skittered and found nothing. In the static, there was a rhythm, soft and even. Breathing, the right headlight flickered. Just once. The way lights do when the alternator is letting you know it would prefer to be elsewhere. The beam returned. It looked more blue than it had. The left stayed yellow. The road ahead looked like a split image. We came to a crossroads. 4 ways all the same, like a printed pattern. The GPS told us to go straight. The blue dot agreed. Riley slowed and then, without looking at me, turned right. "Why?" I asked. He shook his head. I felt like if I went straight, I would go through something. And if I turned, I would go around. I have not decided if that makes sense. I accepted it in the moment like you accept superstition when it is all you have left to bargain with. We went around. The road slanted down into a hollow, where the air was thick and 10 degrees colder. Fog pooled there, low and fast like a crowd's breath. The trees leaned over with their backs turned. At the bottom, a culvert, water running through. I leaned toward the glass and was sure for a second I saw my reflection in the water, even though the angle said I shouldn't. I looked washed out. My mouth was open the way sleeping people's are. The incline out of the hollow made the engine labor. The car whined in a pitch I'd never heard it make. When the tires crested, the phone in the mount lost its mind. The map shrugged and our dot snapped backward. The red pin that marked home skittered in a diagonal and landed behind us. The street label rotated once like a coin spun on a table and laid itself flat. Our street name, not here, not here. Look, I said. I shouldn't have. He looked. He took his eyes off the road for the length of one heartbeat. When he looked back, he jerked the wheel because the road had moved. It had kinked a little, just enough to invite error. The right tire bit the edge. There was no gravel. There was a bevel of nothing. The car's weight pulled. Riley overcorrected. The wheel was too light. I grabbed the dash like someone practicing prayer for the first time. We did not go off. The car obeyed him. It shuddered and came back to center like a dog ashamed of itself. We exhaled at the same time. The sound was ugly. Don't look at the phone, I said. He took it off the mount and handed it to me like a sandwich. I turned it face down on my lap and still felt it surging underneath, pulsing little haptic heartbeats. My own phone had died without showing 1%. It had been at 62 before. The battery indicator had the audacity to be red. Then came the false safety because of course it did. It always does. That's how you get people to open doors. At 1:41 on the car clock, the road widened. The trees fell back. Fields opened on both sides. Barns appeared, real ones with sag to their roofs and light leaking from the cracks like breath. A truck rattled past us going the other way, ancient and arduous, and the driver lifted 2 fingers from the top of the wheel in that rural hello. Riley laughed, and this time it sounded like relief should. I found myself smiling. That stupid, grateful smile people get when a plane touches down. I sat up straighter because I'd slumped without noticing. A minute later, we saw a sign with a town name we recognized. Not ours, the one over. But somewhere. We'd overshot, that's all. We'd gotten turned around. It's embarrassing to admit how fast I forgave the road for what it had felt like the last 40 minutes. My brain leaped to throw blankets on it. We'll stop for gas. We'll get coffee. I'll text my mom from the register. She'll be mad, and then she'll laugh, and then she'll be mad again. We rolled into an intersection with a 4-way flashing red. The truck ahead of us slowed and then stopped. We stopped. We watched it roll through, and as it crossed under the traffic light, it went flat. I don't know how else to say it. For 1 second, the truck had no depth. It was a photograph pasted against the night. It slid across the intersection like someone dragging a file icon across a desktop. Then it was itself again and turned and went, and I didn't see a driver in it. Just a smear of a face where a face should be. It's okay, Riley said, as if he were reading something off a card he'd been given earlier. It's okay. We're okay. We're okay. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the other 3 roads and then at none of them. We went straight. The barns vanished like someone had turned a page. The fields went back to stubble. The asphalt narrowed. The heater gave up and blew room temperature air that smelled like the inside of a closed gym. The radio hissed and then went quiet as a held breath. The GPS chimed. The voice said in a tone I have not heard a machine use before or since, low and apologetic, "You have left the mapped road." "Maybe we're just on a new thing," I said. "Maybe they built something and—" My voice died because the world did something small. The dotted line in the center of the road did not pass under us. It paused. It hung a second like something thinking about whether to continue. Then it resumed. Maybe it had always been like that. Maybe I had never looked at the road's line like a lifeline before, but it looked to me then like the paint had to decide to exist. "Riles," I said. I only called him that when we were joking or when things were bad. "Riles, turn around, please, please," he slowed. The car argued with him. The brake pedal was higher than it should have been, like pushing against something that didn't want to compress. The wheel had no feedback. The reflectors in the center line weren't reflectors anymore. They were little sockets of dark. We stopped. I don't remember the moment of zero. I remember the moment just before it, when the tires hummed the pitch of a jar on a counter and then weren't humming at all. We sat. We did not breathe for a few seconds so we could hear if something else would. There was a tapping then, very soft. The sound of a wedding ring on a window, but we were alone. He put the car in reverse. The gear engaged with a thunk you feel in your teeth. He looked into the rear view and the rear view looked back. In it, a shape leaned forward from the back seat and moved its head, curious. It was not anything I can give you the shape of. It was the idea of a human dragged across the glass of a screen. It made the angle of my neck hurt just to be near it. I turned to look and there was nothing there. But the air had dents in it, like something had rested its head on the seat there a moment before and gotten up. Riley made a sound like someone who has had enough. He put the car in drive. He floored it. The wheels spun a second on what should have been dry, then gripped. We lunged forward, and in the first 20 feet, the phone in my lap buzzed 5 times, one after another, like hearts. When I later checked the call log, there were 5 calls from an unknown number. All one ring, no voicemail, all at 1:49 a.m. The road curved left, but the line said straight. I can't explain that. I know the line is paint. I know paint doesn't decide. I am telling you what I remember seeing. We followed the pavement because what else could we do? And the line parted from us and kept going straight into the field like a cat's tail disappearing under furniture. The field accepted it like it had always been there. We came to an underpass with no over. The pillars rose and held up air. The smell of the laundry soap hit hard, so strong I could taste the sweetness of it, fake flowers, something like blue. Riley swore. I cried. I didn't know I was doing it until I tasted salt. There was the hum of an engine then that wasn't ours and wasn't above. It vibrated the metal of the car in a frequency that made my throat want to close. I think I dissociated, which is a dressy way of saying I forgot how a person is. I have a hole where the next 5 minutes should be. When I come back into myself, Riley is saying, "We can't stop. Don't let me stop." He is saying it like he's afraid of his own foot. He has both hands on the wheel at 2 and 10 like a diagram. He is 20 and has freckles. He is shaking so hard the wheel shivers with him. In the glass, my face looks like a girl who has been asked to identify a body. We crest a small hill and there is a light ahead. Swollen yellow, human. It strikes me in the chest. I have never seen anything more beautiful. It's a gas station. It has to be. I can see the top of the sign. I can see the edge of the canopy. There is a Coke machine in front of the door. There is a poster taped to the glass that says Ice 249 in black Sharpie. The parking lot is wet even though it hasn't rained. The brightness leaks across the road like a promise. Oh, thank God, I say, and it sounds like a cough. We pull in. The tires make the sound tires make on wet concrete. The open sign in the window is lit. The door has those vertical handles you only ever see on family-owned stores. The bell jangles when you go in. I know this in my bones even though we don't get out. There is a stack of windshield washer fluid by the front door. The bottle's translucent blue, 10 high, with a missing space where one should be. There is no one inside. The counter is there. The lottery tickets on their slanted plastic stand are there. The rack of jerky. The cooler of eggs. The one dead fly in the light panel. The backroom door is propped open with a bucket, and I can see a calendar with a picture of a place that has mountains. A small TV is on above the register playing the news with the volume down. The anchor's mouth moving like she's chewing. A security camera bubble holds the ceiling like an eye with a cataract. The clock over the coffee station says 1:09. The debit card machine says Welco and freezes with the last letter missing. A fan spins too slow. Riley puts the car in park. The keys come out because they do. He looks at me like he is asking a question and also answering one. We get out because we are tired of being in the car with it. The night air tastes like electrical tape. The station's lights hum. Somewhere a compressor kicks on, does not catch, kicks off. I realize the silence I'd been holding as a weight in my hands is gone. Here the world has sound again, however small and mechanical. My shoulders drop a little, involuntary. I hate myself for that. I still do. If I had said no, if I had insisted we keep going, if I had pointed out that there were no cars at the pumps, that the trash cans were too clean, that the air hose wasn't coiled the way it should be, would it have changed what came next? I don't know. I think about that more than I should. We walk to the door. The bell does not jangle. It is there. It doesn't move. The handle is cold. Colder than metal. The door opens without resistance. Inside, the air is colder still. The laundry smell is stronger here, so strong it is the air. Everything is wrapped in a thin skin I cannot see and can. I touch a rack of snack cakes and my finger comes away clean in a way that feels like a lie. Hello? I call. My voice doubles back to me. It has a traveling companion, faint and behind, that says hello a fraction of a beat after I do. The TV above the register shows the anchor pointing at a map. The colors are wrong. The counties are squares like in a board game. We take water from the cooler because thirst is a function, and I am determined to complete at least one human task. The seal on the bottle is intact. The water is room temperature. It tastes like the last time you were happy. Riley puts a 20 on the counter like a spell. The fan clicks. My phone vibrates with that ghost haptic again. The time on the microwave behind the coffee is 12 There is a sound then that doesn't belong to any store or road I have ever known. It is the sound a mouth makes when it opens for the first time. Wet, slow, interested. We both freeze. The sound comes from the back room. He looks at me with a question. I shake my head because I have learned at least one thing by now. We shouldn't go toward it. He says run, and it isn't a suggestion. We run. We get to the door before it can decide not to be a door. The bell doesn't ring. The air outside is warm like we stepped into a different month. The sky has a different density. The road looks closer to the station than it did. The lines are shorter. The car is a safe thing because it has doors we can close and an engine we can tell to do things, and it might. We slam the doors. The click of the locks is the best sound I have ever heard. Riley jams the key. The car starts. The headlights come on. The station's glass reflects us doubled. A figure stands in the drink section in the reflection that is not standing in real life. It looks sideways at us. We go. Back on the road, things move. I don't have new words for what they do. The road reuses itself. A curve we take slings us back to where we were 6 minutes ago. But the sign is different now. Where it was blank, it has our street name, spelled wrong by one letter. The fields flood with mist that stops at the road like a dog trained too well. The underpass with no over becomes an over with no under. The phone vibrates without lighting, and when I pick it up, it burns my hand. I drop it and it lands face up and shows my own front camera. The image isn't the inside of the car. It's my bedroom. The phone sits like a little window to my bed with the sheets rucked up. The lamp is on. The back of my bedroom door is visible, and it moves a little and then it closes slowly without a hand. At 2:13, the GPS makes a noise I have never heard. It is not a chime. It is the sound of a sigh heard through a wall. The screen glitches and the map zooms out until we are a dot on a grid of light. Then it jerks back in, hard enough to make both of us flinch, and centers on our dot in front of my house. The map is caught between day and night modes, the colors wrong, the labels doubled. It says, arrived. The red home pin bounces a little as if with delight. We are not in front of my house. We are in nothing. The field to our right is a field. The pasture to our left is a pasture. The tire swing tree comes into view where it shouldn't. Our headlights throw our shadows in long, obedient bands across the ground, but the shadows of the trees lag by half a second, like they are being rendered by someone in another room who is tired. Stop the car, I say. He does. We sit. We listen to the breathing that isn't ours. It comes from the vents. I turn the fan off and the breathing continues a second and then stops like it had a memory of itself that had to run out. We both look at the rear view at the same time. I don't know why. Maybe because in a movie that's what you do, and we were trying to fold ourselves into a script that would at least tell us where the act break would be. The restaurant where we had the party had those ceiling tiles that shed dust if you looked at them too hard. I think of that now because the shape in the rear view moved like dust being rained on. It came forward like leaning on a walker. It angled its knot face so it could do that curious tilt at us again. It loved us, I think. That's the worst part to admit. It loved us in the way a child loves an ant farm. What do you want? I ask, and my voice sounds thin, like paper that has been folded too many times. The shape breathes and the temperature drops 10 degrees. The dome light comes on for a second. It comes on the way it does when a door is opened. All the doors are closed. Outside, the road does something small. The paint in front of us looks wet. The reflectors, the little glass eyes, catch the headlights and throw them back, except they don't. The light sinks into them like water into wool. The car rocks as if someone has stepped onto the back bumper and then stepped off. Riley takes his hands off the wheel. "I'm sorry," he says. "I don't know what for. For turning right. For turning. For not turning. For promising his mom he wouldn't drive late and breaking it. For bringing me. For loving me in a way he would never say because we were both too young. And it didn't feel like a thing you could put in your hands and look at without it dying. It doesn't matter." I say, "I know, and I mean it. And I hope that matters in some inventory somewhere I can't see." We put the car in reverse. The engine whines. The backup cam shows nothing. Not darkness, nothing, a square of it a hole. I watch it and feel my heart trip on a step and scramble to catch up. We put it in drive. The hole stays in the backup cam, small and persistent, like a puncture you can't find in a tire that keeps going flat. We both breathe too carefully, shallow and tall. I don't know what broke us free. I know that we were not in control of the moment it happened. We were pointed at a black shape that had the idea of being a tree. The GPS said our driveway was behind us. The phone in my lap buzzed with a one-ring call from an unknown number. Far away, a dog barked twice and then once. The road's line paused. And then we were not there. We were on the county route that leads to the highway. The one with the billboard for the chain restaurant that has a shrimp night. It was 3:12 on the car. My phone turned on and said 207. The radio found a song I hated last summer and love now because it sounded like anything but itself. We drove home slow. We did not talk because words were fragile, and I didn't trust myself not to break all of them. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on. It was warm. The grill was a grill. My mom's car was in her spot. The house looked like a house. I checked the ring cam later and there is no footage of us arriving. It skips from 11:46 p.m., a cat, to 3:23 a.m., the mail slot puffing because of the heater kicking on inside. Our car is in the driveway and the 3:23 clip like it had always been there. Inside, the kitchen clock said 3:26. My mom had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV on mute and a blanket over her feet. She startled when I came in, made the sound her mother used to make when she was surprised, and then she hugged me hard enough to squeeze the air out of me. I cried again, quietly, like it was a private thing I had to get done before one was over. She asked questions I could not answer and then decided, like good moms do, that answers could wait for morning as long as there were blankets. Riley texted after he got home. "Call?" 3:41 I called. It rang once and stopped. He texted, and then voice memo won't send. He sent a photo instead. It was a screenshot of his health app. It showed his sleep from the last 7 days as bars. That night's bar was a flat line from 12 to 3. Awake, it said for all of it. At 2:13 there was a spike in heart rate. 140 BPM, I didn't sleep. At 4:07 my phone, face down on my desk, lit up with no notification. When I picked it up, the GPS was open. It showed my house, the red pin on it. The route to home was a straight line coming from the bottom of the screen, not touching any streets like a tether. In the morning, the detour sign was still on the state route, but when I went back against every story's advice to find the unmarked road, I couldn't. I drove slow. I chose bravery like a dare. There were fields. There were the same cottonwoods. There were old logging roads with rusted gates. There were no blank green signs. There was a refrigerator in a ditch on the corner of a different lane, but not the refrigerator from the field unless they'd moved it there like a joke I didn't get. The mailman waved at me. He had a face. In the days after, my phone would buzz once and show no missed calls. The GPS would insist my house was behind me when it wasn't. I'd be sitting in algebra and the air would change. A sweet, clean smell would pass through and I'd taste blue. At night, the breathing in my room sits just on the edge of what a person can convince themselves is the house settling. Sometimes the dome light in my car comes on when I'm sure it shouldn't. Sometimes when I look in the rear view, the view takes a half second to arrive. I wonder if that place, if I can call it that, shows up only when you don't deserve it, like a test, or if it's always there and we just turned the coin the right way up that night. I feel guilty when I pick up calls that ring once because some part of me is sure it's a hand stretching up out of the cold looking for mine. And some other part of me knows I'm the one that left first. If you think that sounds dramatic, good. I hope I sound ridiculous. I hope I'm wrong. There's one more thing. I haven't told anyone this, not even Riley. The ring cam clip at 3:23 where the mail slot shivers, if you export it and slow it down, There's a frame where the camera catches something reflected in the front window. It's our car in the driveway. Yes, and the porch light, yes, and in the glass. So faint you can miss it if you blink. There's the reflection of a road running straight past our house where there isn't one. There are little white dashes painted on it. They don't move. They hang there a moment like my memory does, and then they're gone. If you ever take a shortcut and the road you're on isn't named, pay attention to your breathing and the way the lines pass under you. If your GPS says you've arrived before you've gotten where you're going, don't argue with it. Don't stop. Don't look back. Don't follow the light. And if you see your own street appear behind you on a road with no name, do not turn around. The first year I noticed it, the flame winked at me like it knew my name. I was 12 and Halloween fell on a Sunday. Our street, Renfield Court, had the kind of stillness that makes anything bright feel like a small crime. Everyone's porch lights were on timers, warm squares on cold lawns. But the abandoned house at the end of the cul-de-sac glowed with a single, deliberate point of orange. One jack-o'-lantern placed dead center in the front bay window. The house had been empty since before we moved in. The lawn grew in wild triangles. The gutters shed rust. The mailbox leaned like it had something to say and couldn't be bothered to finish. Every October, a pumpkin appeared in that window without fail. No other decorations, no cars, no movement. Just the pumpkin, the house, and the street pretending not to notice. Have you ever felt a house watching you? Not a person inside it. Just the structure itself holding its breath. That's what it felt like passing number 18 on the way to school, or looping back at dusk after practice. I'd walk with my hoodie strings tight and my hands in my sleeves as if I could shrink my body down to something the place would miss. Even back then, I knew the difference between an empty building and an abandoned one. Empty is a choice. Abandoned is a punishment. On Halloween night, somewhere around 9:30 p.m., in that hour when you've eaten too much and you're negotiating with the weight of the mask on your face, I drifted to the end of the street with my friend Hannah. We dared each other to go up to the porch. She always won those dares because I always made them sound like a joke. She took 3 steps, then 5, and then the motion light didn't click on, there wasn't one, and she stopped. The pumpkin had a face that year I swear I hadn't seen anywhere else. Not a grin, not a scowl. Just a neutral oval like a mouth pressed gently against glass. And when I got brave enough to stand next to her, our breath turning to fog, the candle inside flickered and the mouth seemed to lift at one corner. We told ourselves later that it was the flame, or a draft, or our eyes playing tricks in the reflection of the window. But I remember how the air tasted right then, cold and metallic like chewing on a battery. I remember the smell of dried leaves, damp earth, something faintly sour in the wood. I remember that my phone buzzed in my pocket, Mom texting, 9:41 p.m., home by 10 p.m. And when I checked it, the light on my screen reflected in the glass of the window, right where a cheek would be, and for a fraction of a second there was another face there, behind mine. By the next morning it was easy to throw the whole thing onto the stack of ghost stories you keep because they feel good to tell. The pumpkin would be gone by November 1st, it always was. High school came. Hannah dyed her hair blue for a week. I pretended not to care about anything. The pumpkin returned every October. Even when I went away for college and came home with that awful expanded feeling like everything in your childhood shrank while you were gone, I'd still catch myself counting the days to see if it would show up. On October 15th, like clockwork, there it was, centered in the window right where the bay bows out like a throat preparing to swallow. There were theories, a groundskeeper who lived out of town, a mortgage company rule, a prankster with loyalty to the bit. The realtors never kept a sign out front, not even the for sale with a number you could call and hear a cheerful voice say, "We're thrilled you're interested." No plywood on the windows, no boarded door. The county records listed number 18 as unoccupied pending. Pending what? Nobody could say. Talk to an adult and they'd shrug. Talk to a kid and you'd get, "It's a dare. It's a portal. It's where the lady went." On the Saturday before Halloween 3 years ago, I moved back into my parents' house to save money. I told myself it was temporary. It was supposed to be temporary. But that's the kind of sentence you say quietly when you're 26, so it doesn't feel like failure. Dad's half the reason we picked Renfield Court in the first place. Dead end, safe to learn to ride a bike, safe to be foolish in the street, safe to make a racket with a basketball at dusk until someone's mom yelled out from the porch. It's funny how quickly safe becomes a word that stings. It was colder than usual that October. The power company warned about rolling brownouts, and the sky had that hard, pill-white look all afternoon. By the time I got off my shift at the cafe, the streetlights hummed with a faint electric warble. I walked home with a paper bag of groceries warming one hand and my phone warming the other. At the mouth of the cul-de-sac, I glanced down at my phone and saw a missed call stamped 7:19 p.m. from an unknown number ending in 18. I looked up at the house at the end of the street, number 18, and I laughed without meaning to. The sound felt out of place, like a cough in a library. The laughter died when my phone buzzed again and an alert flashed. Missed call, 7:19 p.m., +1, call on 18. It must have been spam, except the time on my home screen read 7:17, 2 minutes before the call had supposedly come in. If you've ever had your mind snag on a tiny stray thing, you know what it felt like. It's a splinter. You can't see it, not exactly. But every time you touch something else, you feel the catch. At home, I put the groceries away and listened to the furnace trying to convince the rooms they were warmer than they felt. The hall thermostat ticked like a polite metronome. Dad was at the station pulling a double. Mom was out with the church committee drafting the holiday light parade schedule. I had the house to myself, which is something you forget how to carry after you've spent 4 years with a roommate's door always 2 strides away. The quiet had weight. I noticed the neighbors' wind chimes for the first time in months. A slow, hollow clink, like ice in a glass you're not drinking fast enough. I made myself a grilled cheese and set my phone on the kitchen table. Every couple of minutes, the screen lit up on its own. No notification, just a bright, empty rectangle. I told myself it was the ambient light sensor overcorrecting. I told myself it was the cheap charger I'd bought from a gas station. I told myself a lot of things because the alternative was to admit that something had caught my name from the end of the street and was tuning itself to the frequency. By 10:03 p.m., I'd had enough of scaring myself into ridiculousness. I put on my jacket and walked out into the cold. The cul-de-sac looked like a planetarium dome, every house with its own constellation of warm windows and square shadows on the curtains. No, 18 sat in silhouette, darker than the space around it, and the pumpkin in the window burned with a neat orange cube of light. The face was different that year. The mouth was a thin line, not a smile or a frown, just a mark that made my lips feel dry when I tried to copy it. The eyes were 2 slanted ovals cut so carefully that when the flame moved, an illusion of depth pressed forward, then back, like breathing. At the curb, I felt the first drop of rain. I smelled the cordite tang of the transformer down the street. The pump house at the corner exhaled a little plume of steam, and the road gleamed in a way that made you want to drive slow without knowing why. A set of footsteps tapped at the far end, the Finch kid jogging up the opposite sidewalk with a plastic sword clacking against his knee. He waved, I waved. The street bent back to quiet, and then the window at number 18 gave off a low flicker that made me think of a heartbeat on a machine. A slow, living blip. I took the steps up the sagging front porch one by one. The boards had that dry, fibrous sound like paper tearing someplace you can't see. Up close, the jack-o'-lantern's candle hissed faintly, like someone shushing me from inside. That's a cliche, I know. I can hear myself making it into one, but that's what it sounded like. At the edge of the glass, a fog bloomed, then cleared as if someone had exhaled on the other side. I leaned in because of course I did. That's what you do when you get close to a cliff. You peer over. In the reflection, the street behind me was a film strip of yellow and black. I tilted my head to line up the edges of my face with the carved eyes. A second face slid in where I wasn't. Not appeared, that implies pop and surprise. It slid, like it had been waiting at an angle until I gave it a surface to land on. A cheek I didn't have, a jawline a little deeper, the hint of a mouth pressed too close to the glass from the other side. I didn't move. The flame guttered and steadied. The shape persisted. It didn't blink. I did, my phone buzzed. A single vibration, the way it does when a calendar reminder pings you. I pulled it out without looking away from the window, and the screen had already opened to the phone app. Recent calls. At 10:05 p.m., a call to my voicemail. Duration 003. Underneath, no 18, no number, no contact. Just the words. A sound played, I didn't touch anything, and it was wind at first or static. Then a voice too soft to be a voice said something like back up or come back or back. It was impossible to tell which one. I ended the playback, and for a second the phone didn't obey. It hung there, lit and neutral, like a face with its mouth pressed to glass. I stepped back so fast my heel caught the loose porch plank and I went down hard enough to jar my teeth. The lights in the bay window brightened, not the pumpkin, the room behind it. A faint glow, enough to make the cut edges of the jack-o'-lantern look wet. I left. I didn't run. I have no pride in that, I just didn't run because that felt like making a deal with something. I walked home with a careful, slow pace I'd use if I had a bowl of water on my head and didn't want to spill a drop. In the space beside me where no one was, the sound of footsteps kept pace. I locked the door. The hall light popped on and I jumped at my own shadow on the mirror by the stairs. The kitchen smelled like burnt cheese and I was suddenly so hungry that I cut the grilled cheese into 4 2-neat squares just to make my hands look purposeful. My phone lay face down on the counter. When I picked it up, the aluminum back was cold enough to bite my palm. I opened my messages to text Hannah, because even after people drift, you keep certain names warm in your hands, and saw a text from her that she'd sent 2 minutes earlier. "Are you watching this?" No punctuation. That's how I knew it wasn't casual. Before I could type back, she sent a photo. It loaded slowly, top to bottom, like a curtain going up. At first, nothing but a wash of orange and black. Then the cut angles of a jack-o'-lantern's eyes. Then my reflection in the glass, my jacket, my hat, my head turned toward my phone, the image I had just been standing in. Hannah's caption was, "Live." A minute later, I was scrolling and one of those neighborhood accounts had a video and I swear I saw you in it. "You at the house?" Timestamp 10:11 p.m. I wrote, "No home." Then I deleted it. Then I typed, "I was." Then deleted that too. Then, "Come over?" My thumb hovered. It felt like a weak thing, that request. But it also felt like the only thing that made any sense. She was a 3-minute drive away. She replied with that instant typing bubble, then radio silence. Then, "On my way." I moved through the house, turning on lights. The living room lamp next to the old recliner had a delayed filament that always made me think of someone waking up reluctantly. The hall carpet snagged under my heel again. Back door. Locked. Front door. Locked. I stood by the window and watched my breath ghost the glass. Across the cul-de-sac, number 18's bay window shone like an eye half-lidded with the weight of staying open too long. The pumpkin's light flickered and paused with a rhythm that felt almost like it was matching my pulse. And then my phone buzzed with the start of a call and stopped after one ring. Do you ever answer a call that rings only once? I don't. You probably don't. We're superstitious in ways we don't admit. The screen showed, "Unknown caller, no number, no scam likely." The voicemail notification popped up anyway. I tapped it and this time the wind sound was louder. The static more textured, as if someone had stepped closer to whatever passed for the microphone. There was a voice or a suggestion of one. It said what sounded like my name except the vowels were all wrong, stretched and thin, the way someone might say it if they saw it written down but had never heard it aloud. I closed it. I didn't play it again. Hannah's headlights swung across the wall in a gentle arc. She beeped once, that light little courtesy beep, and then she was on the porch knocking like the door had startled her by being solid. When she stepped inside, she pressed her fingers to my forearm and left them there, counting herself real. Her hair was longer than the last time I'd really looked. She'd grown careful in all the small ways that happen after 25 without anyone noticing. "You okay?" she asked. I said nothing for a beat too long and then said yes. In the quiet between sentences, I heard the refrigerator motor kick on in a low moan and the wind push against the back door. The house settled with a soft internal pop like joints flexing. I said, "It called me." Hannah tried to make a face that said, "Sure," but her mouth didn't know how. She took out her phone and tapped. The neighborhood account's video was a shaky handheld of number 18's window from the end of the street. You could see the pumpkin glowering calmly from behind glass and, for a few seconds, my reflection moving in front of it. In the glitch of the phone's autofocus, the shape behind me shifted. Not much, not enough to be called a move. Just enough that if you didn't know what you were looking at, you would say it had to be a light. "I think that's me," I said, understating the obvious. "It is," Hannah said, "but what's the second thing?" We pressed our heads together over the screen the way we used to. The house circled us with the quiet you get in big empty spaces at night. The video hit the moment where the phone jostled and the reflection popped. There, boom, and the light stuttered into a strange long ripple. like it had been waiting to breathe but had waited too long and had to pull in everything at once. The comments under the post were what you'd expect. Fake. I see it. My uncle knew the owners. No one owns it. Some of the comments were people we knew, and that made it worse. I didn't like the idea of being part of other people's context. I want to look again, I said. I can't defend that sentence. If I were you, I'd be closing this tab right now and muttering, "Don't go back." And you'd be right. If someone else told me this story, I'd ask them why. I'd ask them what about the first warning felt insufficient. The truth is petty. I didn't want to be the kind of person who got chased out of my own street by a pumpkin. That's it. Pride, small and stupid. That and the other truth, I was curious. Curiosity is a soft word for a sharp thing. We put on our jackets. Hannah took a flashlight from the drawer that also holds batteries, rubber bands, candles, and screws that don't fit anything you own. The beam cut a white path through the living room. "If we see anything weird," she said, and her laugh after that was the kind where someone is trying to diffuse TNT with a butter knife. We leave. Outside, the cold had a different face. The air felt thinner, like rooms emptied of furniture. The streetlights hummed louder than they should. We walked to the end of the cul-de-sac in a silence that didn't feel companionable or heavy. It just felt like we were trying not to add to any pile of sound that might interest something. The Finch kid's sword lay forgotten on the curb. The wind pushed it an inch, and the plastic scraped the pavement in a whisper. At the porch of number 18, the floorboards didn't creak. They just quietly gave. That's worse somehow, when something bears your weight like it's already planned what happens if you fall. The pumpkin's face was closer now, and the eyes seemed narrower. That was my imagination, I knew that. But still, I took a step sideways, away from lining up with it. Hannah shined the flashlight through the glass behind the pumpkin. Dust motes rose and fell. The room beyond was empty in that staged way. No drapes, no furniture. Walls the color of teeth you've forgotten to floss. At the far edge of the beam, something like a staircase, and farther back, another door leading deeper into the house's chest. A draft brushed my cheeks. It smelled faintly of old water and something slightly sweet, like apples left too long in the drawer. The flashlight beam trembled and Hannah whispered, "Okay?" I nodded. Even then, I heard a sound from inside that I've failed to describe accurately every time I've told this part. It was like someone biting into a frozen grape. A wet crackle, a tiny pop, and then the quiet resealed itself as if we'd shut a book. I looked at my phone because I needed the fiction of doing something normal with my hands. On the lock screen, the clock read 10:23 p.m. A notification slid down. Missed call, 10:25 p.m., unknown. I blinked. Hannah saw it too. She said too brightly, "Your clock's off." We both knew it wasn't. My settings were set to automatic. It was right before that. The time had stuttered. The porch light, which had never worked in my memory, flickered on, off, on, off. It stuttered twice more and then settled into a low, steady glow so dim you could pretend it was a trick of the street lamp across the way. In the glass, our reflections sharpened in that unrealistic way camera filters try to do. Hannah lifted the flashlight and the beam made a perfect white circle on the pumpkin's face. The candle inside went out. The darkness that replaced it wasn't regular dark. It had a texture, the way a room feels different at 3 in the morning than it does at 9 p.m., even with the same bulbs. I smelled the singed wick before I saw a thin ribbon of smoke rise and smear against the glass. Hannah swore under her breath. The porch light above us brightened a fraction. In that dim glow, I saw my reflection's mouth open and then, God, stay open while mine closed. The gasp I didn't make fogged the glass in a shape like an oval pressed against it. Not mine. Right where a mouth would be if someone else were on the inside, practicing being me. Hannah's hand clapped over mine. "We're leaving," she said, low, a voice you use with a skittish animal. We stepped back. The porch didn't protest. The door didn't shift. The street remained politely unaware. We were safe right then. Do you know that feeling when it's all still salvageable? That thin strip between now and the next thing? We were standing in it. And then my phone rang again. One ring, stop. This time I answered. I don't have a good reason. I pressed the green circle and held the phone to my ear. And instead of wind or static or my name in a stretched vowel, there was that quiet you get in churches and old libraries where the sound doesn't vanish. It gets held and judged. After a second I said, "Hello?" The quiet did not change. It held me. Then just on the edge of hearing, A voice like someone speaking under a blanket. I could tell it was a woman because of the shape of the syllables, not because of any pitch. She said, "Let me out." I should recognize that voice. It's part of being from a place where everyone shops in the same 2 aisles. But I didn't. She said it again, barely louder. "Let me out." Hannah watched me. "What?" she mouthed. I shook my head because how do you translate a voice that sounds like the suggestion of a voice is asking me to do something? "We will." "Regret?" I said. "Where are you?" It felt foolish as I said it. The voice ignored the question and said, "Open the window, please." And then, like an afterthought, my name, correct this time. Clear and precise, and I think that's what did it. Because I'm not brave and I'm not clever, but I am susceptible to my own name. There are things you do because you've already decided somewhere small in yourself that you'll do them. I slid my fingers under the heavy window sash and pushed. It did not budge. The paint had sealed it. The house wasn't going to give it up. I tried again, adding my shoulder, feeling the old wood slide an imperceptible millimeter and then settle. I grunted. Hannah said, "What are you—" And then, because she is who she is, she braced her hand beside mine and lifted. The window rose an inch with a reluctant, sticky sigh. Cold air slid out. It had a dampness that felt like a basement's lungs. The smell was stronger. The forgotten apple sweetness doubled with something like old wool. The darkness inside the room didn't rush forward. It stayed where it was, gathered politely like people at the back of an elevator. The voice on the phone said, "Thank you," and in that "you" was something like affection and something like the fatigue you hear when a doctor tells you this might sting. We froze. Nothing happened. 3 seconds, 10. The window was open a hand's width. The cold collected around our wrists. The porch light above us dimmed a fraction and brightened. Far away, a car door closed. The Finch kid's sword scraped again. In the cold, our breath made matching shapes. Then the voice said, not on the phone now, but from inside the room, muffled under something, "Don't," and then stopped. And then, because there had to be one, there was a sound from deep in the house. Steps. Not heavy, not light. Just the sound of someone who knows the layout and has no reason to hurry. We pulled the window down. It didn't latch. Something in the mechanism had bent. It stuck halfway and we had to both lean on it. When it finally slid into place, the faintest whisper of skin against glass came with it. Imagine someone putting their hand on the other side at the exact second you wanted the barrier to feel the most like a barrier. The house settled again, or maybe my knees did. The candle inside the pumpkin lit itself. That's what it looked like. One moment, dark. Next, a wick glowing from within like a stare returning after a long blink. The carved eyes narrowed again, or I imagined they did, and the mouth pressed into that straight, indifferent line. We left then. I won't tell you we ran, but if you watched from your window, you'd call it running. Back at my parents' door, I fumbled the key like I'd never used one. We went inside with the purposeful speed of people who know there's nothing behind them and are trying to outrun the memory. We sat on the kitchen floor, not because it was rational, but because it was the lowest point and sometimes lower feels safer. Hannah laughed and then slapped her own "let's not be hysterical" hand over her mouth. I poured water into glasses like a host. The house watched us and said nothing. We tried to pin what we'd heard into pins that would hold. "A prank," Hannah offered. "Speakers inside, a timer. Some kid." "Then why was the voice on my phone?" I said. She deflected. "Your phone is weird." She wasn't wrong. I held it up and watched the screen turn on by itself again. Bright, blank, reflective. The time read 10:24 p.m. again. The minute wasn't advancing. I toggled airplane mode. The no service text at the top hung there like a dare. In the reflection of that little glass rectangle, I saw my eyes in the kitchen light and, for a second, a shape behind me, bending close like someone learning to whisper. I spun no one. Just the dent in the couch where Dad's weight usually lives and the plant Mom is always apologizing to for forgetting to water. We did the thing that makes sense if you're someone who has been raised to trust documentation we recorded. Hannah set her phone on the table and started a voice memo. I opened my notes app and typed times. 7:17 p.m. Saw missed call timestamped. 7:19 p.m. 05 p.m. Voicemail. No. 18:003. The back voice. 10:11 p.m. Hannah texted, "Are you watching this?" And then, because I could, I added, 10:23 p.m. Window opened a little. It looked deranged, like writing "spider moved right" on a wall while the spider watches. Still, it helped. Writing sometimes does. We played the voice memo back after 5 minutes of silence. We expected to hear ourselves being bravely banal, commenting on how cold it was. What we heard first was breathing. Quiet. Not ours. As if the microphone had been set inside a closet while someone stood just outside. Then the smallest scratch of something dry, paper across paper. Then my voice saying, "It called me," and Hannah saying, "Sure." Then our steps, the door, the porch boards compressing, and then something I couldn't place until the third listen, the sound of a mouth closing. "Delete it," Hannah said. "No," I said, and surprised myself with how quickly I said it. "If we delete it, it gets to be the only copy." "Of what?" she asked, sharper than she meant. "What is the it?" A fair question. I dodged it like a coward. "Come over again tomorrow," I said. In daylight, she did. I was waiting at 11 a.m. with coffee and the door open before she knocked. The day was bright in that cold weather way where the sun is just a color, not a temperature. We wore gloves. We walked to number 18 with the mutual pretense that we'd laugh when it looked normal, under the sober eye of noon. The pumpkin was still in the window, but in daylight it looked innocent. The soot smudge above one eye could be a flaw. The mouth was just a cut. The glass turned everything into a second copy. Inside the room empty. Floor bare. We tried the window with the stupidity of hope. It didn't move. Not even the millimeter it had the night before. Maybe it swelled shut, Hannah offered, and the part of me that forgives people their kindness loved her for trying to meet me where the world could explain itself. We circled the house. Behind it, the back door had a deadbolt big enough to make you notice. The fence leaned and the gate latch had jammed years ago and everyone let it be. I stood with my palm flat against the old wood while Hannah tried the doorknob. It didn't budge. Good, fine, great. We are rational. We are having a Saturday. We are having coffee. We are seeing things in the pumpkin the same way you see a face in your shower tiles and decide it's someone you used to know. As if to bless the farce, a dog barked 2 houses over. A lawnmower revved. A cloud passed and the temperature dropped a hair. That was when Hannah pointed with her knuckle, the gesture of someone who doesn't want to take her hands out of her gloves. "Look," she said. The backyard grass had a strip where it was flattened, the long, narrow mark of something dragged or something sat. It led from the back step to the fence to a small gap where 2 slats didn't quite meet. Not dramatic, not even especially recent. Just there, like a line on a map that wasn't on yesterday's copy. "Okay," I said. "Okay," Hannah said. We went home. We shored up our hearts with soup and normal conversation. We didn't talk about number 18 for the rest of the afternoon. We tried the trick of ignoring the bad thing and hoping it loses interest. It almost worked. At 3:07 p.m., my phone lit up of its own accord again and showed an open call screen to voicemail, with the little timer counting up, 0001, 0002, 0003. I hadn't pressed anything. I stared at it and it stared back. At 03 it disconnected. A new voicemail appeared. I pressed play and heard, distinctly, the sound of the window we had tried that morning moving a fraction of an inch. Wood against paint. Then the kind of laugh you do when you're relieved. But it wasn't ours. I'm tired of this part. The slow escalation, describing each coincidence like it's a miracle of narrative restraint. You get it. It got worse. The days leading to Halloween were just an inventory of little hesitations. The porch light at my parents' place turned itself on at 3:13 a.m. 3 nights in a row. Hannah's microwave started counting backwards from 10 whenever she walked by with her phone in her hand. On October 29th, a neighbor's Ring camera caught a figure walking in front of number 18's bay window at 2:41 a.m. The comment said, "Teenagers." I recognized the gate and it was mine. I was in bed at 2:41 a.m. An alibi is not the same thing as comfort. Halloween landed on a Tuesday. Work was slow and jittery. A kid in a dinosaur hoodie asked me if we had skeleton lattes, and I didn't know how to make a joke about that. The sky held a blue the color of a bruise and the air was cold enough to hurt the delicate inside of your nose. I walked home at 6 and watched families doing their thing. A dad with 2 kids in a wagon, a mom in a witch hat, a teenager adjusting his vampire cape with his reflection in a parked car's window. The normalcy, that first step in every story, was right there, glowing harmlessly. It's amazing how easily the normal holds up under assault. At 7:02 p.m., I heard footsteps on our porch and opened the door to find not trick-or-treaters but a small paper bag, the old kind with a folded top. On the outside, in block letters, "At 3, don't look." Inside, a tea light candle, unused and nothing else. Hannah texted a second later, "Did you just put a weird bag on my steps?" I said no. She said, "Me too." Same message. We called each other and listened to each other breathe. "Don't look at what?" she asked. I could hear traffic on her end, the small-town Doppler effect of a single car coasting past. At 8:30 p.m., the night was at its peak. Costumes moved in packs. Laughter overlapped. Number 18's window glowed like it always did. That should have been comfort. That the thing stayed in place the way it was supposed to. A set piece you can count on to be your backdrop. But it felt like something else. Like a lighthouse turned the wrong way, warning the sea instead of the shore. We didn't discuss going back to the porch. We had said we wouldn't. We didn't. At 2:57 a.m., I woke up with my chest tight and the sense of being called by name but in a room with no mouths. The house had that depth of night sound, the hum of the refrigerator like a low organ note, the furnace sighing into the vents. I lay and counted my breaths because it's what you do when panicked if you've read the right listicles. My phone lit up on my nightstand. No notification. It lit again. Again. I turned it face down. It vibrated once and stopped. The clock on my bedside glowed 2:59 a.m. The minute didn't change. I knew in the exact way you know an elevator is about to stop at your floor, that at 3 something would happen. The note in the bag had said, "At 3, don't look." I didn't look. That was the only rule offered. I can be taught. The house became a church holding a breath. Outside, a car passed 3 blocks over and the sound painted itself on our street like thin watercolor. The second hand on the clock slid and didn't click to the next mark. I kept my eyes on the dark rectangle of my closet door and named objects in that small, strained voice people use in the dark. Lamp, chair, shoe. Down the hall, the stairs gave one careful creak as if someone put a foot down politely. The porch light went on all at once, finally, decisively. The shade in my room shaped a square of pale on the wall. At 3 a.m., the house filled with the quiet of a held breath, and then the faintest tap sounded on my bedroom window, like a fingernail tested the thickness of the glass. I did not look. I counted to 20. At 12, the tap came again. At 18, a long, slow exhale fogged the lower corner of the pane. Then another. I had the sudden conviction, stitched from nothing and everything, that if I looked into the glass I would see perfectly, my own eyes returning my gaze, and that behind them would be an expression that was not mine. The third exhale came, and far away, maybe 2 houses down, I heard footsteps on someone else's back stairs. Like an echo. Not everyone got the note, I thought, or not everyone obeyed it. Then, the softest vocalization. Someone testing the mechanism of a throat, a shape of sound before words. The porch light clicked off. The house stepped down into its nocturne. The clock decided it had waited long enough and turned to 3:01 a.m. The pressure left the room like air easing out of a plastic bag. I lay still and swallowed carefully so I wouldn't make a sound large enough to bear history. In the morning, Hannah texted me a photo before I could text her. I looked, she wrote after it. The image was a close-up of her bedroom window. The inside surface of the glass had a faint patch of condensation in the shape of a mouth, an oval not quite centered. There was the suggestion of teeth, not imprints, just a pattern in the fog where the warmth had met the cool in scalloped arcs. I didn't open it, she typed, a beat later. I felt like if I did, I'd owe something. We didn't see each other that day. Some distances, even 2 miles, are much longer when you're trying to carry words across them. Here's where the story should tell you what it was. A woman who died in the house. A squatter's prank, a gas leak hallucinatory run, a pocket of cold air that seduces you into assigning a face. I have all those theories lined up like jars on a shelf, and each of them contains a small understandable thing. But on November 2nd, the town posted a notice on the utility pole at the end of the street, the kind with rip-off tabs for a community survey about neighborhood upkeep. Number 18's tab was torn away. Someone had written in shaky letters on the stapled paper, "Don't go at night." The ink ran where it got wet, and the stroke of the G in go bled down like a drip. You want an answer. You want the thing to be one thing. I can give you one. I called the number on the county property records that afternoon. Without thinking about it, I did it at exactly 3:00 p.m. My mistake, I know that now. A woman answered, her voice like a pile of old receipts, thin, papery. She told me the house had been in probate since 1997. She told me the relatives lived out of state. She told me there had been complaints of trespassing, which made me feel briefly scolded. When I asked about the window, she said, after a pause, "What window?" And then, after another pause, "We don't have a key for the inside door." That night, on November 2nd, I dreamed of being under a sheet. Not the classic ghost kind, something heavier like drop cloth. The weight of it made everything sound a little farther away. Light came in all around the edges, but I couldn't tell where the top was. I woke and my face was cold and damp, as if I'd been breathing against fabric I couldn't see. On November 3rd, the pumpkin was gone. The window was empty and clean, no soot, no wax star, nothing, like a mouth pressed flat. The house looked abandoned again, not empty. Not something, that word we pretend to leave out. I don't walk by number 18 at night anymore. I cross the street to avoid seeing my reflection in the glass. At 3:00 a.m., I keep my eyes on the center of the room and I count. My phone still lights itself sometimes. It happens more often when I'm near mirrors. It happens when Hannah sends me a photo, no caption, of a window I don't recognize and the faint suggestion of breath on the interior. 2 Mondays ago, the call log on my phone showed an outgoing call at 3 a.m. to a number ending in 18. Duration, 014. I don't remember dialing. The voicemail review tone played back to me the sound of someone saying, "Thank you." And then the slow, satisfied slide of something moving out of something else's way. This is the part where I apologize. I can hear how it sounds. I can hear the way my voice has gone flat as I try to keep it from doing the things fear makes it do. If I'm honest, the only line that matters, the one that catches in my throat when I try to be even a little brave, is this. I was the one who pushed up the window that night. No one's making me write that. I love the feeling of it giving. I hate that. It felt like helping and it felt like trespass and I didn't stop. If something got out, or what we let out wasn't the thing that asked, that part has my fingerprints on it. You want to know if it ever shows itself. It does, but not the way you think. It's not in mirrors. It's in the tiny corrections your life makes without asking you. The porch light turns on at 3 a.m. even when the switch is down. You wake up with your face cold and your throat raw like you've been breathing through cloth. Your phone rings once and stops and you feel your hand rise to answer anyway. When you pass an empty window at night, and there's the faintest sheen of condensation low in the corner, you'll be certain for one suspended second that it's the shape of a mouth about to form your name. Then the glass clears and you're left with the taste of old apple and iron. There's a security camera across from number 18 now. The city put it up after a rash of pranks. Sometimes when I can't sleep, I watch the live feed. Most nights it shows a loop of nothing. Raccoons, fog, the occasional slow car. But once every few weeks, between 2:59 and 3:01 a.m., the pixels shiver, and the window of number 18 looks less like glass and more like the surface of very shallow water. If you watch it long enough, you'll think you see the light inside change like someone has cupped a hand over a candle and then moved their fingers away. It's subtle. You could argue with me until daylight that it doesn't happen. I would nod and make you coffee and pretend with you that something doesn't hold my name in its mouth and practice the shape when I'm not looking. If you walk down Renfield Court tonight, you won't see a pumpkin in the window. It's not October anymore. The house looks like all the other abandoned houses you've ever ignored, until your phone lights up once in your pocket and you feel yourself start to turn toward the glass. I can only tell you what I wish someone had told me years ago, before I stood there trying to line my face up with a carved one and saw a second face slide in to greet me. If your phone ever rings once and stops, don't look at the window. Maybe what you heard tonight was just a story, or maybe it was a warning. Because on Halloween, the darkness doesn't forget. It waits. If you think you can handle what comes next, subscribe to Nightward Echo, and don't miss the next descent into the dark.